It was an ordinary working day at the Imperial Bank. Visitors, as always, were very numerous. But towards the end of the working day, the crowd thinned out, and there were few customers. A girl of about 7 years old entered the premises. She was dressed very poorly. A shabby jacket with a broken zip, old trousers and stubby. Obviously 2 big boots. In her hand, she held a green-colored children's pistol. The guard looked closely at the child and thought, "What's she doing out here? So small alone. Where are the parents? It seems a pity to kick her out. It's very cold outside. Let her warm herself." The child's face was serious beyond her years, and her eyes were crying. The girl confidently approached the window and pointed her toy gun at the cashier with the words, "Auntie, make me a millionaire. Give me some money. I really need it, or it'll be bad for everyone." And the child burst into tears. Helen, the cashier, had seen a lot of things over the years and thought that nothing would surprise her. But here even she was taken aback and did not know how to react, whether to cry or laugh at the ridiculous child's prank. According to the instructions, in any unclear or dangerous situation, the cashier is obliged to press the panic button and call the banker to the hall. The woman decided to do so just in case. Just in case. A few minutes later, Mr. Patterson came into the room and looked with surprise at the little girl with the gun, who continued to sob and smear tears on her cheeks. He asked Helen, "What happened? An emergency situation? What's the problem?" The woman replied with a smile, "Yes, this little thing wants money, asks for a loan, otherwise he threatens me with a gun. I realize that it's a toy, but just in case I decided to invite you." The man was stunned. But before he could even say a word, a panting old woman ran into the bank. She was also dressed poorly, but neatly. The old woman grabbed the little girl by the arm and wailed, "Anne, my dear, why did you go alone? I can't keep up with you. You've upset the people." Mr. Patterson was dumbfounded. "All right, dear citizen. Is this your granddaughter? What kind of a show are you putting on here? What a bunch of burglars. You can get punished for jokes like that. We're a serious organization. You need to keep a better eye on your child." Grandma just waved her hand. "How can we not organize it? A performance? We've already been refused credit by all the banks." So she got desperate. Her mother is dying, in a coma. She needs an emergency operation. They're asking a lot of money for it. What choice does the child have? What's the child's way out? She's the one with a heart. She's probably seen a lot of films and decided to take a desperate step. For God's sake, forgive her. Mr. Patterson took another stern look at the little girl. There was something about her that caught his eye, something about her that reminded him of someone else, but he couldn't make out who. The child folded her hands in the form of a prayer and, looking straight into his eyes, began to beg. "Uncle, lend us some money. Please, Mummy is dying. Just don't send us away. We have nowhere else to go with Grandma." Something twinged inside. The banker took pity. He waved them off. "All right, let's go to my office. We'll talk in detail." "Tell me, what's your story?" Mr. Patterson said. "We'll see what we can do." In the office, the old woman sighed and began to tell. "I haven't even introduced myself to you, Mr. Patterson. My name is Mrs. Caroline. You see, it's a long, complicated story. I'll just tell you the main thing. Anne's mom's name is Mary. She and her daughter rent a room from me. She's a good, decent, hard-working woman. She runs a bake shop. It was hard enough as it was, working 12 hours a day, as long as she had enough to live on and to take care of her kid. Then 2 months ago, Mary was coming home late at night, and a car hit her on a pedestrian crossing. And what's more, it drove off straight away. A dog walker called an ambulance. Well, she's in a coma. She needs emergency surgery. I've got all her diagnoses right here. I made copies. Here you go. Where can you get that kind of money? There's no one to help her, no relatives. She's like a daughter to me. Anne's like a granddaughter. My pension is a pittance. And I'm in my 80s. I feel sorry for Mary and Anne. I can't bear it. I mean, if she dies, they'll take the baby away to an orphanage. What kind of future does she have? It's a desperate situation. Please look at the paperwork. Maybe we can get a loan. Don't worry, Mary will recover. She'll work it all off. And even more, we'll pay it back together, little by little. A man can't die if he has no money after all." Mr. Patterson looked at his watch and said, "I've got it all figured out. I'll look at the papers at home tonight. I'll see what I can do to help. It's not my bank, so it's not just up to me. It's a really tough situation you're in. I'm sorry I have to go. Anne, don't be sad. Here's a chocolate bar." And he smilingly handed the little girl a large milk candy. The child took it timidly and said quietly, "Thank you. I believe you will help us. I don't want Mummy to die." The banker returned home to the posh mansion. Everything was unchanged. There was food from the restaurant in the kitchen. The wife did not even pay attention and did not rush to meet her husband. On the contrary, she was in parade, in a provocative dress with a huge slit and stiletto shoes. William asked tiredly. "Where are you going at night?" Olivia wrinkled her nose and answered reluctantly. "We thought we'd go to a hen party with some friends. Why can't I go?" The man shook his head disapprovingly. "Aren't you often going out at night? And the outfit is clearly not for a hen party. Don't you think you're overstepping your bounds?" Olivia suddenly grinned with a brightly painted mouth and replied caustically. "As I recall, you got the banker's job with my father's help. You should be happy about that. The rest is none of your business. I'll see you later. I'll be late." And she walked away, heels clacking loudly, not even looking back. Sam sank tiredly into the chair. He felt sick to his stomach. How sick and tired of everything. This marriage of convenience, this insufferable silicone doll Olivia, and this mansion where everything was foreign. It's like I'm living a life that doesn't belong to me. Honestly. And then he remembered the old woman's papers. They were still in her briefcase. Well, the evening's gone anyway. At least I'll leaf through them. And he went deep into reading, but when he saw the name of the sick woman, he almost collapsed. He shook with shock. Swan, Mary Swan, that can't be right. Oh my God. Is that what Anne looked like? That's it. The man jumped to the bar, took out a brandy, poured it into a glass, sipped a good portion, then leaned back in his chair and plunged into deep memories of the past. Mary grew up in the village. Her childhood was hardly a happy one. Her parents died too soon. Her mom was still in labor. Father 3 years later fell under a combine harvester due to negligence. So her granddaughter was raised by her grandfather Tom and grandmother Cynthia. They lived poor lives. We fed from the vegetable garden and the goat Zorka helped. Grandma made delicious cheese and milk porridge. As a child, Mary could be called more of an ugly duckling than a beauty. She was thin and unformed and a little wild. But when she finished school, everything changed. She simply turned into a beautiful swan. Slender, shapely beauty with prominent breasts of the third size and plump, naturally sensual lips. All the local men were openly staring at her with their tongues lolling. Grandmother Cynthia began to worry and kept teaching her granddaughter. "Don't spoil me, Mary, don't spoil me. Men have only one thing on their minds. They all promise beautifully. And as soon as what, immediately into the bushes." The girl remembered her grandmother's words and kept her defense firmly in place. She wouldn't let anyone get close to her. Work in the village was very sad, and Mary went to see Brown's farm out of despair. She got a job with a local rich man and tried to get used to the hard work, but it wasn't to be. The rich man was a notorious lover of women and booze. Everyone in the village knew it. So he began to court Mary. He pinched her back. He looked at her breasts point blank. He tried to press the frightened girl in a dark corner, and all whispering to her, "Mary, girl, you're so sweet, you're drooling. Be mine, I'll pay you. You'll walk in silk and bathe in gold." This fat, disgusting and nasty womanizer was so disgusting to Mary that she pushed him away with her eyes closed so as not to see his sweaty, nasty face. Then one day the girl couldn't stand it any longer, ran home, cried, and told Grandma Cynthia everything. "I'm not going back to the farm, Grandma. You can do anything you want. That nasty Brown's groping me, promising me gold, just to get me in bed with him. I'm so disgusted. What do I do? I don't know." Granny was outraged. She raised her hands to the sky. "Look at him. What a bastard." "It's not for nothing," the women whispered. "He won't miss a single skirt. And he's got a wife and 3 kids. And still he's a bloody bastard. Tom, come here. We're going to have a council meeting. Did you hear what my granddaughter's grieving about? What can we do? There's no other work in the village. Maybe we should go to the chairman and complain. Let him put a stop to this ghoul." Grandpa spat and waved his hand. "What's the use? They're all in on it. A hand washes hand. Mary's a good-looking girl. She'll never live here. She'll never live here. Let her go to town. There's a lot of people there. Nobody cares about anybody. Maybe she'll find a job. Maybe she'll get a good marriage. All the young people are going there, and no one's lost yet," he added. Mary was both pleased and frightened at the prospect. Grandma Cynthia, agreeing with her husband, ran to the neighbors to ask for money for her granddaughter's church journey, and for the first time, for they had not a penny to spare. Thanks to kind people, they collected a decent amount. Grandmother divided everything in parts, wrapped it in a handkerchief, and began to give her granddaughter instructions. So, in one place do not keep everything, or at any time they will steal. Put a little in different pockets, and keep an eye on your purse and bag. I know you've got a mouth like a crow and they're gone. Keep looking. I've done the math. You'll have enough for a room and a month or 2, and then you'll be on your own, and don't be lazy. Yeah, remember what I said about dogs. Come on, let's sit down for a while. It's time. Let me give you a hug, granddaughter. Don't forget your grandparents. Don't forget to visit," said Grandma Cynthia. Grandma Cynthia cried and waved at her for a long time. Grandpa Tom only grumbled. "Why? By God, you're so damp. Think of good things. or they'll steal or something else. Everything will work out for Mary. She's a pretty girl, not lazy with a head. Mary was uneasy on the train. All sorts of bad thoughts were going into her head. But at the railway station, a very nice, intelligent man sat down in her compartment. They chatted merrily about all sorts of things. He was a joker and told interesting stories. The girl laughed without a word and completely relaxed. After a couple of hours, the man said goodbye and left. Mary looked in her bag for money, decided to order tea, and suddenly did not find her purse. She felt a chill inside. There was also most of the money there. The dazed girl rushed to the conductor. My God, my traveling companion took out my wallet with money. I don't know how he did it. He was talking nonstop, and I had my ears hanging open. What should I do? She just shrugged her shoulders. Well, you young lady, you're crazy. Have you never traveled on a train? They steal more here than at railway stations. You should have been more careful with your possessions. You must have got off the train. Not a beneficiary. Now it's all gone. For the rest of the journey, Mary just roared like a beluga whale. She had no idea what to do or where to go. She scraped together some of her grandmother's sacks. But it was a drop in the ocean. Not even enough for a room. She imagined horrible pictures of herself begging for alms or worse. She cursed herself with the last words. God, what a fool I am. Her grandmother had said, keep your eyes open. But no. What a nice man. What will happen to me next if I have not yet arrived and already got into the story? Mary looked round fearfully as she stepped out of the station, clutching her traveling bag and her lady's bag. She looked lost and cornered. Her mind was a mess. Suddenly, an elderly, stylish, and expensively dressed lady approached her. She immediately recognized the young, frightened provincial girl, who was obviously in trouble. The stranger introduced herself. Hello, darling. My name is Mrs. Zoe. I work as a recruiter, recruiting staff for clinics and companies. Did something happen to you? The girl was even more frightened. She'd never even heard those words before. She answered quietly, sobbing. My name is Mary, the first come from the village to look for work. All the neighbors collected money for me, so that I had enough for a room and food for the first time. But a man sat down with me on the train, and somehow he got into my confidence and stole my wallet. I don't know what to do, but keep in mind I won't do anything naughty. My grandmother warned me that in the big city, that kind of thing might be offered. Mrs. Zoe laughed heartily. You don't get it, silly. I'm hiring maids, cleaners, not what you think. If you need a job like that, I can help you. You'll find a place to live, too. Housekeepers tend to live in rich people's houses. But I tell you right away, you need to work hard, unconditionally fulfill all the tasks. The owners do not bore and do not impertinent, but also do not do, you know what, as you put it, inappropriate things. And then there are those kind of people, just trying to sneak into bed with rich husbands. Mary calmed down, smiled, and nodded. Then I agree. Don't worry, I'm not like that. I've never even had a boyfriend before. I'll try my best. You won't regret hiring me. That same day, Mrs. Zoe gave Mary a full briefing. It took another couple of days to teach her the ins and outs of being a maid, how to use modern appliances, and the girl was safely ensconced at the Pattersons' country mansion. They were bankers and very famous businessmen. Besides her, there was another maid, Amber, and a cook, Emma, living in the house. The head of the household, Mr. Ryan, was a stern, short man with glasses. He said a cursory hello to Mary without even looking at her. Mary didn't like his wife, Mrs. Amanda, at first. She was full-figured, dressed to the nines. She had a grimace of displeasure on her face, her lips were tight, and her gaze seemed to bore through her. She asked Mary who she was, where she was from, told her the rules of their family, the daily routine and her duties. At last the woman dropped out. My son Sam still lives with us. He's a student, finishing his degree in economics. He's in class right now. I warn you not to look in his direction. I know you, Hicks. Mary barely made it through the exam. Finally, she was released to the servants' quarters. There she met Amber. The woman asked quietly, in a businesslike manner, "What, has our heroine intimidated yet? She can do that. But don't worry, I'll teach you everything. They pay well and stable. You won't make that kind of money anywhere else, so just go along with it and do your job properly." And Mrs. Amanda, Mary asked. Don't mind her. Try not to make her angry. I don't let her see you so much. She's always so disgruntled. And so began Mary's working life. At first, she wasn't very good at everything. After all, in the village, the girl, except for a broom and a rag, did not know any gadgets. But Amber, as promised, quickly taught her what to do, and in a month Mary could easily cope with any tasks. The pay was really good. Mary had never held such money in her hands before. It would have been all right if it hadn't been for Sam. When she first saw him, she was cleaning the windows in the hallway. The girl was stretching as hard as she could and trying to wipe as well as she could. The guy quietly came up behind her and admired. A tall, slender beauty. Her blonde curls fell out from under her bonnet. Droplets of sweat appeared on her temples. He couldn't take his eyes off the new maid and gazed at her shamelessly. Mary felt someone's gaze on her back and looked away. The fact that she was being stared at so intently by the owner's son A tall, athletic, good-looking boy made her uncomfortable. She yelped and almost fell to the floor from the stepladder, but Sam deftly picked her up and kept her from falling. When she found herself in the guy's arms, Mary was instantly dizzy. He smelled of expensive, brightly colored male perfume. The touch of his strong hands on her waist gave her goosebumps. The girl immediately jumped up and mumbled, "I'm sorry, Mr. Sam. You scared me. I didn't expect to see anyone at this hour. It's morning. Everyone's off to work." The young man winked at her. "Why so formal, Mr. Sam? Just call me Sam. I mean, we're the same age as you. And I take it you're Mary. Where do they make such a pretty girl? You shouldn't be a maid. You should be in a modeling agency. I'm delighted." "I'm delighted." The girl blushed, embarrassed by the compliment. She apologized again and grabbed a bucket and a rag and ran off. Next, she and Amber went to beat out the cushions, and her partner whispered to her, "I saw the master's boy near you. Don't even think about it, or they'll kill you." She'd take 3 hides for her favorite son. Though he's a good-looking boy, I don't doubt it. But you realize there's nothing but a bed for guys like us. So why spoil your career? You'll be disgraced, and then no decent house will hire you. Mary nodded her head. "Yes, I'll try to keep out of his sight. I don't want any trouble." From that day on, Mary's job became a game of hide and seek. Especially when the boy came home after class. The more she tried to stay out of his sight, he would appear out of nowhere and try to talk to her. It seemed like a harmless conversation, nothing like that, but the way he looked at her, it was more expressive than any fervent confession. It was a look that made Mary's insides tear up and turn upside down. A million butterflies fluttered in her stomach. She'd go into a stupor, blush, and like a little girl, just run away. Another weekend came. Amber was released home, and she went into town. Her hosts, too, had gone to an important acquaintance for an appointment and said they would definitely be gone until evening. Mary had faithfully completed all her errands and was quite free. Only she had nowhere to go. No one and nowhere was waiting for her in the capital, and to go home to the village and back, far away. So the girl decided to walk along the forest paths, to breathe fresh air. She was enjoying nature, breathing in the fresh aroma of pine needles and herbs and thinking about her own thoughts. Suddenly, as if out of thin air, Sam appeared right in front of her. She even jerked from surprise. The boy laughed. "Hello, Mary, I scared you again, but I'm sorry I came home early. I thought I'd go for a run. I work out a lot around here. I see my beautiful girl coming, but how could I run past her?" Mary blushed again, and Sam suddenly pressed her against a mighty pine tree and passionately kissed her plump, sensual lips. The girl tried to moo and fight back at first, but after a second she just got dizzy and her legs gave out from the pleasure, and she stopped resisting. How sweet those kisses and hugs of his were. The strong, trained body, the scent of a man, and that look that paralyzed her. Breaking out of the embrace at last and breathing heavily, Mary stammered, "Sam, don't. What are you doing? What do you want me for? I'm just a country maid. I'm no match for you. We can't be together. Your mother warned me on the first day to stay away from you." The boy answered her eagerly, "My silly girl, you don't know your own worth. You're a beauty, a goddess. You're a naive girl, a girl who would be envied by her peers. Ever since I saw you, I've lost sleep and peace. Honestly, you're all I can think about. But for some reason you repel me. I can feel that you like me too." But Mary suddenly cried and ran to her room. She locked herself inside, fell on the bed, and sobbed even harder. Sam was right. They were drawn to each other like a magnet. There was nothing they could both do about it. And now, after such a passionate kiss, she was literally shaking. Her whole being, which had never known male love and affection before, literally demanded continuation. She scolded herself. What kind of a fool am I? Again, I'm looking for problems on my head. But why did I fall in love with him? What kind of punishment is this? There was a soft knock at the door. Sam whispered, "Mary, open up, please. We need to talk." The girl exhaled, wiped her tears, and went to open the door. On the doorstep stood a guy, smiling guiltily and holding a charming bouquet of daisies in his hand. "I'm sorry if I scared you or offended you. I didn't mean to. Honestly, know this, you're the most beautiful girl I've ever met, the most pure and open. And I'm totally in love with you. I called my parents. They're going to be gone for a while. We're all alone in the house, except for the gardener. Let's go to my room. It's a bit awkward to talk in here." And Mary went, of course. They talked long and warmly. Sam confessed his love. And then he began to cover her neck and body with tender kisses and whispered some words to her. Anyway, that was the day of their first intimacy. The guy was amazed that Mary was a virgin. I mean, she's 19 years old. That's unthinkable by city standards. He began to treat her even more tenderly and reverently, realizing that she had given him the most precious thing. From that day they began to meet, first secretly, furtively kissing in secluded corners, and then officially. After all, the secret always comes out. Sam really did love Mary very much. He wasn't playing around, and he intended to marry her. The The guy sincerely believed that his parents would understand him. After all, true love is more important than ranks and regalia. But when he announced this officially at dinner and introduced Mary as his bride, in the family, Pattison broke into a deafening scandal. Mrs. Amanda screamed like a madwoman. "It'll never happen. Sam, are you out of your mind? What surprised you so much in bed with that hillbilly that you'd marry a maid? Do you want our family name all over the press and high society? It's an unheard of disgrace." Then she turned her furious face towards Mary and shouted, "Get out of here. I knew I shouldn't have hired a hillbilly as a maid, and you're a good girl. You're not losing your way. You're like a leech to my son. You want a residence permit in the capital and to live in chocolate. You'll get by. You'll have to earn money first. You're used to spreading your legs." Mary sobbed and tried to justify herself. "Why are you doing this? Sam and I really love each other. We don't need anything. Money isn't the most important thing in life." Mrs. Amanda pointed at the door. "Out, you're fired. I'll complain to the agency and they won't hire you in any decent home again." Mary ran off in tears to pack her things. Amber whispered to her, "I told you to fool around with Sam and that's it. Mom won't let you two go out, let alone get married." The girl sobbed. "I don't believe it. He said he loved me and couldn't live without me. He's coming for me now and we'll leave this house together." Amber only twisted her head and went away from the sin, or else she would get under the hot hand. Meanwhile, the battles continued. Sam was screaming with emotion. "Oh, that's it. Then I'll leave. We'll live on our own. If $1 million is more important to you than the happiness of your beloved son. I love her, don't you understand? I really love her." Then my father intervened. He had been watching silently until then. "Well, son, here's a scale. On one half put your career, your wealth, your rich and happy life and our help. And on the other half put your Mary and that's it. How long can you last with her in some cockroach-infested dorm with no decent facilities? How long can you stand working 12 hours a day? You'll run away from that life in a month. But I won't take you back. That's my condition. It's your choice. If you leave with her now, I'll block all your cards and you'll never come back here. Oh, by the way, your sweetheart's leaving with a suitcase. Well, you better run after her." Mary turned round for a second and tried to catch Sam's eye, but he lowered his eyes and didn't move. The girl shouted after him, "Coward! Bastard! I hate you!" And she ran away crying. Everything was boiling inside her, and there was more bitterness than anger. Amber was right, too. They all want the same thing. How could he, Mary thought. He promised he wouldn't betray her, and we'd be together till the end. He said all those words, swore he loved me. But he's a mama's boy. I despise him. And I fell in love, stupid me. I'd rather go out and have fun. It was a good thing she hadn't spent much of the money she'd earned over the months. She managed to rent a corner with a lovely woman, Mrs. Caroline, on the outskirts of town. But when Mary realized a month later that she was pregnant, she was horrified and burst into tears again. After telling her landlady everything honestly, Mary heard, "Why don't you tell your fiancé you're pregnant? Maybe he will come to his senses and marry. Or help. Anything can happen." But Mary just waved her hand. "No, Caroline, he won't marry. He can't get away from his mom. If this hero finds out I'm pregnant, he'll kill me. I'd rather have an abortion." Mrs. Caroline shook her head and looked at the girl disapprovingly. "Don't you dare. Don't take such a sin on your soul. You'll get her back on her feet, won't you? You're not the first, you're not the last. I'll help as much as I can. I'll keep an eye on her. And killing a living soul is the last thing you want to do. A child is God's plan. It's not given to everyone. I would have given anything to have children, but God didn't give it to me. That's all." That's how they got on. Mary got a job at a kiosk nearby selling baked goods. The owner was an Armenian. Ashot. He saw, of course, that the woman already had a small belly. He understood everything. But still he hired her. He felt sorry for her. He knew that this place is not much sought after, and this one will hold on to the job with her teeth. And so it was. Mary was a saleswoman right up until she went into labor. When she went into labor, she rang Ashot and said in a panic, "I've closed the kiosk. I'm going to the hospital. The keys are where they usually are. Don't hire anyone to take my place, I beg you. Better put me on the night shift or 24/7. When the hospital brought her a large, cheeky Anne, she kissed her and cried, so much the baby looked like Sam. The woman whispered, "Your daddy doesn't want us." "Well, to hell with him. We'll live on our own. We're good, we can handle it." The first year of the child's life was especially hard for Mary. The woman was literally torn between work and the baby. She was sleeping 4 hours at a time, and that was on and off. Thanks to Caroline, she helped out, and Anne was quiet too. Didn't give the old nanny much trouble, but then it got easier. And went to nursery. If she was sick, she stayed with Caroline or sat in Mary's kiosk on the sacks in the corner, drawing. Not once, during this time, did Sam make any sign of himself. He had simply cut that fleeting romance with the maid out of his life. That was all. And Mary, angry as she was, couldn't get Sam out of her heart. He sat there firmly. Though she had mixed feelings for him now, hatred, anger, contempt, love, tenderness, awe, she realized that they would never even meet again. He was too high-flying, and she should forget him and move on. But she could not. That fateful night, Mary was hurrying home to her daughter. She was just crossing the road at the crossroads when the pedestrian light turned green, and Mary went. And then a bright red sports car flew straight at her at breakneck speed. The woman only had time to notice that behind the wheel was a blonde, and that was it. Then there was a screech of brakes and darkness. Sam, of course, didn't know any of this. Ever since he'd shown cowardice and betrayed Mary, they hadn't spoken to each other. His parents had talked him into marrying Olivia, daughter of a millionaire banker and owner of the coolest and most expensive petrol stations in town. The wedding was lavish and pompous. The chosen one was a platinum blonde doll, skillfully molded by the best specialists. The figure was also without flaws, and all would be fine if it weren't for one but. Sam didn't like her one bit. Not only that, but the arrogant, insolent girl was frankly unpleasant to him. Olivia, on the other hand, really liked Sam, athletic, tall, pumped up, and handsome. That's why the wedding took place. But having quickly satisfied all her sexual desires in bed, the glamorous woman was frankly bored. She wanted to drive, to fly to Paris or holiday in Bali, that she was carried in her arms and worshipped, and earlier fans did so. The spouse was different. He burned day and night at work. His daddy gave him the position of manager of a large bank. When she looked into his eyes, she wanted to see admiration, but there was a look of contempt in his eyes. It so pissed off the woman that she, not thinking long, made a lover out of boredom, then another one, and then another. Sam sensed something wrong and began to voice his resentment. They began to fight a lot. He couldn't understand how a married lady could go out all night and come home in the morning drunk. It was unheard of. But Olivia put him off every time. "You live in my mansion and work in my father's bank, so sit tight and keep your mouth shut, or I'll report you to Daddy, and they'll throw you out like a dog. What am I supposed to do with you at home? Stand at the cooker and have screaming babies? Oh no. That's not what I was born to do," Olivia replied. Sam was outraged. "Why did you get married in the first place? I don't get it. If you don't want a family and children." The woman laughed. "The same thing you did. Who asked us? It was profitable for the parents. That's all. Now they have a powerful corporation. Everybody's happy. Me too, by the way. In high society, I have a decent husband. And I'm a lady of status. Where do I spend my nights? That's none of your business. I'm bored in bed with you. I'm bored with everything." So they lived like cat and dog. Two complete strangers under the same roof slept in separate rooms long ago. The intimacy faded. Sam regretted 1,000 times that he'd chickened out and betrayed his beloved. He had never forgotten Mary and knew he would never love anyone so much again. Sam reread the diagnosis over and over again, whispering to himself, Mary Swan God. It turns out Anne is my daughter. My favorite woman is living in poverty and dying, and I'm sitting here." He searched for Brandy with shaking hands, dialed the number of the hospital, and found out where Mary was lying. Without putting it off, the man went there and decided to talk to the attending doctor. The time was late, but money decides everything, so the doctor agreed to meet. He sighed and answered, "I'll be honest, Mrs. Swan's situation couldn't be worse. She suffered a severe head injury in the collision. She's been in a coma for a month with no progress. There is only one chance to change something. It is to carry out urgent brain surgery and remove the damaged areas. But here too, no one guarantees that the woman will tolerate it and survive it all. Personally, I will not take such responsibility. There is only one specialist in the capital, a virtuoso of his craft and a lover of experiments. That's Mr. Andrew Willis. You should contact him. He might be willing to operate. But then again, it's a very expensive operation, and as I understand it, the family doesn't have the money." Sam was shaking. He was almost screaming. "They'd give me the coordinates on this guy Willis. I'll meet him tomorrow. Can I see her for a few minutes, please?" The doctor just waved his hand, saying no problem. The patient was no good anyway. The man quietly entered the IQ room. What he saw shocked him. Instead of a fresh, glowing Mary, there was a haggard woman lying on the bed, her eyes sunken, her cheeks gone. The color of her face blended in with the sheets, not a speck of blood, and her skinny body was wrapped in dozens of sensors and wires. Sam instinctively took her hand. It was icy and dry, and began to whisper to her, "Mary, my girl, forgive me, you bastard. You will not die. Do you hear me? I'll die for you, but I'll get you out of death's clutches, for your daughter, for us. I still love you. Do you hear me? Believe me." He even thought her eyelids fluttered, and he begged her forgiveness again and again. The very next day, Sam put all his business aside and went to see a famous medical luminary. Mr. Andrew Willis carefully studied all of Mary's medical records and thought for a moment, then said, "The operation could certainly be done, but it would only be at my own risk. There is no 50% certainty that the patient will survive. There's no time to lose. Do you understand? Most likely, irreversible processes have already started, and the woman can either die immediately without regaining consciousness or remain, how can I put it mildly, incapacitated. I'll write down the amount. It's very large, I warn you. And I emphasize again that the risk of death is enormous, and I'm only agreeing to this because it's the first time I've ever done it, purely out of experimental interest. Sam started to calm him down. But you said yourself that if nothing is done, Mary will die anyway, and there's no chance of her coming out of the coma and recovering. Isn't she an incapacitated person now? So why not try to save her life, if there was even a 1% chance of a miracle happening? The sum was really huge. Even for a wealthy man like Sam, he'd emptied all his cards and accounts and quickly sold the expensive Porsche he'd recently bought. And that was barely enough to cover all the expenses. Immediately, he made a transfer to the clinic and phoned Mrs. Caroline. Good afternoon, Mrs. Caroline. It's Mr. Sam for you. Remember we talked about the loan for your friend Mary Swan? I have some news for you. Give me your address. I'll be right over. On the way, the businessman stopped at the Children's World shop and bought Anne a new jacket, boots and more clothes, toys and 2 bags of groceries. He had trouble finding the house number in the yards. The dwelling was old, but quite well maintained and cozy. They were already waiting for him there. The kettle was boiling in the kitchen. The old woman was fussing and setting the table. Anne hovered round and helped her grandmother. An excited Mrs. Caroline said hello, invited her guest to the table and asked, "Thank you, Mr. Sam, for not forgetting about us. Will you give us a loan? Will they approve it? That's what the hospital says, that it's too late. They're saying Mary's not likely to make it. I don't want to believe that." And the old woman began to wipe away the tears from her eyes with the corner of her handkerchief. The man hastened to reassure her. "Don't worry, you won't need a loan. No one would give you such a huge sum with your income. I've already paid for everything. The operation is the day after tomorrow at the Institute of Neurosurgery. It'll be performed by the best luminary in the capital, Mr. Andrew Willis. I've arranged. Let's pray and hope for the best." The old woman even splashed her hands and could not believe what she heard. "Lord, Savior, you're our benefactor. What a lot of money this is. God willing, Mary will be all right. We'll make it work. As long as she lives." And came over quietly and put her warm little arms around Sam's neck. She looked straight into his eyes and said, "Thank you, Uncle. I will pray for you now and for Mummy to survive. She won't die, will she? She's all I've got besides her and Grandma Caroline." Sam instinctively hugged the little girl and felt such warmth and tenderness inside. He gently flicked her nose and held out 2 huge bags. "These are all for you, and clothes and toys. If you're not the right size, I'll change them in a jiffy." The woman and the girl gasped, and the little girl ran happily trying on clothes and looking at toys, and the businessman began to put on the table products from the other bags. "This is also for you for the first time. Sort it out. I think I got the essentials." Mrs. Caroline even cried. "Thank you so much, dear man, for caring so much for strangers. It's a time when you forget your own family, and even strangers." Sam suddenly said in a hoarse, broken voice, "Mary is not a stranger to me, you know. She's my first love, my strongest love. And I betrayed her once. I was a coward. I'm a bastard and a bad man. I've ruined my fate and hers. Maybe Anne is my daughter too, I don't know. So I really want her to live, and I'll be on my knees begging her forgiveness." He waved his hand and walked away, trying to suppress the sobs that burst from his chest. On the day of the operation, Sam didn't go to the bank at all, shifting all the duties to the deputy. He walked like a caged tiger through the hospital corridor and waited. Time seemed to stop and the hand of the clock stood still. He asked God sincerely, as best he could, in his own words, "God help. I wish Mary had lived. I know I'm a scoundrel and I'm very guilty before her, but you can see that I still love her. I don't want anyone else but her. Make her well, please." Mrs. Caroline and Anne sat quietly on the couch. The girl did not cry, only stared silently at one point, apparently also praying and waiting. 4 hours passed. At last, Mr. Andrew Willis came out of the operating theater. He took off his cap and approached Mr. Pattison. "Well, gentlemen, you may rejoice. I don't want to boast, but I'm very pleased with the result. Now let's look at the dynamics. But the odds are good that the woman will come round. Let's hope for the best. You two split up. You can't see her yet. She's in intensive care. Come back tomorrow." Sam shook the professor's hand and thanked him, and also ran to the doctor and said tearfully, "Thank you for saving Mummy. She's going to be all right, isn't she?" The doctor averted his eyes and quietly replied, "I really want to believe that your Mummy will get well, but it's not all up to me. I did everything I could. The operation was a success." Mary finally regained consciousness. Out of a thick, heavy fog, she heard her daughter's voice. "Hello, Mummy, how are you? Are you feeling better? When will you open your eyes? I miss you so much and I pray every day." Me and Caroline and I are going to go and get you some medicine, and there's someone who wants to talk to you. And then Mary heard the same husky voice she'd never forgotten. Mary, my darling, it's me. Sam, I'm sorry, darling. I'm a bastard. I betrayed you so badly. I can't believe it's been so long since I've forgotten you. I remember all our kisses, your iridescent laughter, your big, beautiful eyes. I don't know if you'll ever forgive me, but I really want you to get better. Everything inside the woman suddenly turned upside down and warm. She gathered herself with all her strength and wanted to shout to the whole world. I haven't forgotten you either. I love you too, but she only managed to open her eyes slightly and whisper, I too. All the sensors on the life support system suddenly turned red and beeped, and a terrified Sam ran out after the nurse. Get over here. Come on, Mary's awake. Just then, a bunch of staff rushed into the room. There was a commotion, looking at the woman's pupils and checking for reactions. The man was escorted out the door. Anne and the grandmother came up and were very frightened when they saw the panic in the room. The baby immediately cried. Is Mommy ill? Why are there so many doctors in there? Is she getting worse? The man pressed the little girl to himself and calmed her down. On the contrary, Bunny, don't worry. Mummy woke up. She heard your voice and mine and came to her senses. I can't even believe it. They were finally allowed to see Mary. The woman saw all the family and friends and cried. Anne threw herself on her mother's neck and began to hug and kiss her. Mary whispered, Daughter, darling, how worried I was about you. How glad I am that all is well. Baba Caroline, thank you for looking after my little girl, not abandoned, not sent to the orphanage. Sam, how are you doing? I thought I'd never see you again. The old lady said, So that's him, the bank director where Anne and I went to get a loan. Mr. Pattison paid for your operation. If it wasn't for him, I don't know. You never stood a chance. Only the famous Professor Willis took it on his own risk, and that was because Sam miraculously persuaded him to do it. So there you go. Mary looked at Sam with gratitude and tenderness and softly, Thank you for life. You're my guardian angel now. Sam, we probably need to talk. Anne and her grandmother nodded understandingly and left the room. The man came closer. He looked at this short-haired woman with huge, attractive eyes and admired her. He compared her to Olivia's doll-like artificial face and realized that he would never be able to be under the same roof with her for a second. The man took Mary's hand and said, looking directly into her eyes, Sweetheart, forgive me if you can. I'm so sorry to you. I chickened out. I went along with my parents. Who knows how much I regretted it later. They talked me into marrying Olivia, the daughter of a millionaire, but she and I are total strangers. We live like cat and dog. You're still in my heart, and I don't want anyone else. Mary's eyes immediately filled with tears. So you're married. So we're not going to work out again, but I want you to know that Anne is your daughter. I found out about the pregnancy after we broke up and decided to keep the baby. Sam waved his hands. I've already guessed that Anne is mine. I'm not leaving you now, you know that. I'm going to talk to Olivia tonight, and we're going to split up. I want to live with you and my daughter. Do you understand? I'm begging you to believe me this time, please. Mary grinned bitterly. Do you think she'll give you a divorce that easily? And if she doesn't? I'm scared. I remember how your mother humiliated and embarrassed me back then. I don't want to go through that again. The man replied quietly, Don't worry and don't think bad thoughts. Get well. I've bought all the medicines. I'll come every day. Why don't you tell me how it happened? Why haven't they found the person who hit you? The woman sighed and shrugged. I don't remember much. The light turned green. I walked across the crosswalk. Suddenly, this red car came out of the darkness. I only caught a glimpse of the blonde behind the wheel, and that was it. Sam bent down and kissed Mary gently. I'll take care of it. The perpetrator must be punished, but I've got to run. Know this, I'm happy I found you and I won't let myself lose you again, and I won't let anyone else hurt you. Mary brushed away a tear. Be that as it may, I love you, Sam, and all these years I've never been able to tear you from my heart. Sam arrived home late that night. To his surprise, Olivia was home waiting for him. She looked worried. Oh, where have you been for so long? What's going on? You've never been late before. Dad said you sold your car and withdrew all the funds from your accounts. What was that for? The man sighed and replied, Olivia, we need to have a serious talk. I needed the money to help someone who was in trouble. I want to divorce you. We've been strangers for a long time, and we don't like each other. And you know it. So why torture each other? Besides, you have someone else I know. I, too, met a woman I'd foolishly lost years ago, and I still loved her dearly. Olivia's face twisted with anger. Is this the maid your mother kicked out in a huff? And you spent all your money on her? Or are you out of your mind? I won't give you a divorce, you know that. I don't want to be the talk of the high society. I'll call my dad right now, and you'll be left with nothing. Surprisingly, Sam wasn't frightened or upset. On the contrary, he was somewhat relieved. I don't care. Do what you want. I'm packing my bags, I'm leaving, and we're getting a divorce. It should have been done a long time ago. Olivia was taken aback by her husband's determination. After all, he had never crossed her before. She screamed hysterically and started calling her favorite daddy. Sam silently packed his things into his suitcase. He wanted to be free from the shackles he had fallen into so many years ago with the help of his parents. Now he had someone to take risks for, and he wanted to change his life dramatically for Mary and his daughter. The scandal was devastating. The millionaire was furious. He immediately fired Sam from his position as a banker, blocked all his accounts, and even came to the hospital. He tried to intimidate Mary, but it didn't work. This time, the woman stood her ground. "You can even kill me if you want to. But I won't give up, Sam. We love each other. Do you understand or not?" Just to be on the safe side, Mrs. Caroline went away with Anne to a friend's house in the country, out of harm's way. I don't know what those crazy millionaires might think. Sam wasted no time. He moved into a rented flat for the time being and decided to watch the SecTV cameras at the very junction where Mary had been hit. What he saw shocked him. The red foreign car belonged to his father-in-law, and his wife Olivia was behind the wheel, not alone, but with a young lover. The footage clearly shows her hitting Mary and then driving off, without even looking back. That's a twist. The man was pissed. What a bastard. How can you hit someone and not even get out of the car to check on them? No help. How can you live your life in peace after that, going to expensive salons, tanning salons, and fitness centers, knowing that you may have killed a man? Such cynicism simply didn't sit right with him. He made an appointment with the city's video camera company and picked up the footage. Without thinking, he dialed Olivia's number. She answered right away. "What is it, darling? You scared? Did your chicken come to its senses? That's right. Come back immediately and apologies while I'm being kind." The man interrupted her menacingly. "Listen to me. I've got the kecked footage of you hitting Mary and fleeing the scene, and I'm going to the police with it tomorrow. How much time do you think you're going to get and what they'll say about you in high society? You're a piece of shit, aren't you? You almost killed a man yourself, you have a young lover, and you dare to accuse me of something. Or should I show this tape to your father? I think I'll do that. I'll send him a copy so he can admire his precious daughter." Olivia's voice trembled, and she changed her tone. "Sam, listen, don't get too excited. I don't go to the police. I don't want to go to jail. I wouldn't survive there. And don't tell my dad. He'll kill me. You know how he is. What do you want? Let's make a deal." Sam said, "You'll transfer the money that went to Mary's operation into my account, and you'll convince your daddy to leave Mary and me alone, and you're going to disappear from my life forever. Otherwise, I will carry out my threat. Is that clear?" Olivia spoke quickly. "Yes, of course I'll do it. We'll part quietly and peacefully. Thank you. You're right. I never loved you either. And the other night, I had a few too many drinks, and when I realized I'd hit a man, I just drove off. That's all. What was I supposed to do? Go to jail voluntarily?" The man sighed. "God is your judge. I've said my piece. Bye." Olivia kept her word. She wired Sam the money he'd spent on the surgeries, and the millionaire dad stopped harassing Sam and Mary. The woman recovered quickly. Sam visited her in the hospital every day. They talked at length, holding hands and feeling their hearts beating in unison. Soon Mary was discharged home. Mrs. Caroline returned from the village with Anne, and at a family meeting it was decided that they should live together in the old woman's house. She'd asked for it. "My dears, all of you, come and live with me. I'm all alone. I've grown so fond of Anne and Mary, they're like family to me now, even closer. It's a nice house. It could do with a bit of work. It hasn't seen a man's hand in years, and when I die, I'll leave it to you. I have no relatives anyway, but I have my own yard, vegetable garden. My child has a place to run around, and I'm not bored in my old age." Everyone agreed happily. In just a couple of months, Sam made a major renovation, expanded the kitchen, equipped the nursery, and added another room, a living room. Everything turned out modern and cozy. The man did not regret at all that he was now not a rich man at all. He got a job in a small firm as an economist and worked hard. He forbade Mary from selling at the kiosk. To keep her at home, he bought her a sewing machine. After all, the woman had dreamed of it since she was a child, and finally she enrolled in a sewing course. She began to do very well. And soon the first orders came in. Mary couldn't help but rejoice. She didn't have to work 12 hours a day carrying crates. She enjoyed her home, her family, and her favorite hobby. Sam had changed a lot over the years. He went from a fun-loving well-to-do major to a serious and responsible family man. 3 months passed. Anne called the man Uncle Sam, and it bothered him a lot, and he decided that it was time to tell the girl the whole truth and put her on his surname, as it should be. In the evening, the man sat down beside the child in a chair and began an important conversation. "Anne, I need to have a serious talk with you. You see, I'm not just another man's uncle. I'm your real daddy. and I'd like to call you my daughter and give you my last name. What do you think about that?" The girl looked at him strangely and suddenly asked, "If you are my daddy, why didn't you live with us before? Where have you been all this time? So is it because of you that Mum cried a lot at night? Did you abandon us? You didn't love us? Why do you love us now? What if you leave again and Mummy cries? Because if you love, you don't leave." And threw the pencil on the floor and ran away crying. Sam was very upset, though he realized that his daughter was right about everything. If she loved him, she wouldn't leave him. But he did. Mary began to comfort him. "I told you, it's still early. She wouldn't understand. She's too young." Mrs. Caroline decided to intervene in the conversation, though she didn't usually do so, but this was too serious a matter. "Now, children, I'm going to talk to Anne. She's just very upset with her father. I mean, she's seen her mother in poverty for so many years. We've got to explain it to her properly. She's a smart girl, and she's old enough to understand. She'll understand." Mrs. Caroline went quietly into Anne's room. She was lying with her head on the pillow, sobbing. The pensioner began to speak as if not to her, but simply into space. "Once upon a time there was a prince and a princess. They loved each other very much. But a wicked witch came and broke them up, separated them." The girl suddenly said angrily, "Stop treating me like a little girl, Grandma. I'm an adult and I understand everything. My father left my mother and he didn't need us for so many years, and now he's fallen in love with us. And then suddenly he won't love us anymore. Is that it?" The old woman sighed. "Well, if you're an adult, then listen to another story. It's like that, and you're right. Your father was young and listened to his mother. She told him not to love your mum. Yes, he got cold feet. They broke up. Your mother realized she was pregnant with you, but she didn't say anything to the groom. So you can't blame him either. He just didn't know about you, you know. And when he read the papers and realized it was the woman he loved who was dying, what did he do? That's right, he saved her. Like a fairy tale. And why? Because, my dear, he loves her very much. But don't you understand that? Your daddy was very happy when he found out he had a daughter. Now you're together, a family. So what's wrong with that, tell me? Don't you love him?" The little girl answered quietly, "I do, and I want it to be always so." Mrs. Caroline then added, Well, then why do you take offense? We are not angels and often do bad things as well as good. There's nothing you can do about it. That's how human beings are. The main thing is that my father realized his mistake, repented, and now you two are together. It's not our business to judge him. Parents should be accepted and loved, whatever they are, because they are the closest people to you, understand?" The girl wiped her nose, smiled, and hugged her grandmother. "Grandma Caroline, how clever you are. You told me everything so well. Why did I, silly me, get angry with Daddy?" She ran happily into the living room, taking Sam's hand. "Come on, Daddy. Let's go and have tea. Only that big chocolate candy is mine." The man happily picked up the little girl in his arms. "My little girl, my sunshine. Are you not angry with Daddy anymore?" She twisted her head. "No, I'm not. I love you. You'll always live with us now, won't you? And Mum won't cry?" Sam kissed his treasure and promised, "I swear to you, Mummy will never cry again, and neither will you, because I'll never let anyone hurt you." Then they drank tea with sweets and cakes that Mary and Mrs. Caroline had baked together, and talked and made plans for tomorrow. Mary sat next to Sam, snuggled up to him, and realized that this was a woman's happiness. She had found it at last. How good and peaceful it felt. And Sam's parents lived out their lives alone in their huge mansion. Mrs. Amanda had turned over the years into a bitter, boring old woman, mercilessly nagging her infirm husband. She cursed the maid who had taken their son away from them. Sam had stopped talking to them altogether. He had only telephoned once to say that he was perfectly happy with Mary and his daughter, and was very sorry that he had missed so many years because of his own mother's hatred. Mrs. Amanda wandered around the empty rooms and literally howled with longing and loneliness. She never realized that it was her own fault, but things could have been very different. How could you think of an old woman having a baby? Ashley, a blonde girl of 13, stood on the porch of the school and watched as her friend Emily, who was in the same class as her, talked to her older brother. Ashley dreamed now of being in her classmate's shoes and having a conversation with the guy. The girl had fallen in love with her friend's brother Jason last year, and she didn't even realize how it happened. Ashley just woke up one day with thoughts of this teenager, and after that she thought about the guy all the time. As soon as the girl realized that she had fallen in love, she started giving signs of attention to the high schooler. She planted unsigned love notes, but soon she, as a secret admirer, was exposed, and ridicule from Jason's buddy followed. Ashley felt strongly about it at the time. However, her mother Mary, who knew about her daughter's crush, told her to keep her mind off the guy. You're still young, and it's far away. You're not in love, just a crush. As time passes, you'll laugh at your own crush. But a year had passed, and Ashley was still in love with Jason. And now she was standing there watching Emily's friend talking to her brother. Ashley, watching the conversation between the two, dreamed about how her lover would come to her and confess his feelings to her. The girl noticed her friend and her brother heading towards her. Ashley felt a slight shiver go down her spine. She tried to pull herself together. In the meantime, the pair approached her, and Jason said with a good-natured smile, "Hey you need to grow up a little." And then, looking back at the older kids, maybe you're expecting those words from me. But my sister has already told me that you are withering from unrequited love. Ashley, hearing those words, shuddered involuntarily, as if from a blow. The girl looked at her friend reproachfully, and then she turned and ran away. At the moment, she didn't care that she was acting like a cranky little girl. Ashley was annoyed by her lover's words. She was also hurt that her friend was secretly talking to her brother about her. Ashley ran and heard Emily asking her to stop and talk. However, the girl was not responding to her mate's cries. Ashley wanted to run home now, lock herself in her room, and let the tears flow, which soon happened. When the girl calmed down, she made a vow to herself that she would not talk to her friend again, and she also promised herself that she would tear her love for Jason out of her heart and would not look in his direction again. And when Mary's mother came home from work, Ashley pronounced to her, "I don't hang out with Emily anymore. So if she comes over, just tell her I'm not here." "What'd you get?" "It's no big deal. You'll make up in a couple days. By the way, what was the fight about? What was it about?" "It's a long conversation. Emily's a traitor." "That's a pretty big thing to say. You can't make such serious accusations against a man, especially since Emily is your friend. Why don't you tell me what happened?" Mary said affectionately and sat down next to her daughter. Ashley looked at her mother carefully, then excitedly told her what had happened. The woman listened to her daughter, and then she patted her head and said softly, "Your friend cares about you. She wanted to do you a good favor. Emily thought that talking to her brother about you might help draw the boy's attention to you. But what her friend didn't realize was that you can't command the heart. If Jason doesn't care about you, there's nothing you can do about it." Mary paused for a moment. Then, with a sad sigh, she said, "You surprised me, daughter. I thought you weren't thinking about Jason anymore. You're getting a little secretive. Or is it my own fault that I don't notice anything but work?" "Mom, don't say that," Ashley said. "I'm not hiding anything from you, I just don't want to worry you. You really work so hard that I don't want you to worry about me. Taking care of you is the best part for me. You're the only one I've got. And you have to work hard for one simple reason: you need money. Your grandparents on my side of the family are long gone. Your father divorced me 2 years ago and forgot about the obligation to pay child support. And your grandparents on your daddy's side don't need you. Why not? You see, daughter, in some families it happens that parents have 2 children and one child becomes the favorite. That's what happened in your daddy's family. He didn't become a favorite from mom and dad, and as a result they don't need you as a granddaughter. If before the divorce with your father they still congratulated you on your birthday, now it does not happen. And you know it yourself. Mom, you always told me that you and Dad got divorced because that's how life works. How does it happen?" her daughter asked her mother in a low voice. Ashley had longed to know the answer, but there had never been the right occasion for such a conversation. Mary sighed softly, put her arm around her and said, "You're getting older and older every day, and I don't even notice it. Well, I'll answer your question. Your father fell in love with another woman who gave him a child, the son he dreamed of. So he made a choice, but not in our direction. Just don't blame him or judge him. Life is complicated. You'll realize that later." After talking to her mom, Ashley felt a lot better. She even took her mind off the fact that she was upset with her friend. The girl kept thinking about the relationship between her parents, and also pondered how she would act in her mother's situation. And in the evening, when Emily called to apologize, Ashley interrupted her and said that she was no longer offended. But she added, "Now it's nothing personal. I won't trust you. Or you'll tell the whole world." Time moved on. And now Ashley was 16. The New Year's Eve ball was coming up. The girl carefully thought over her closet for these holidays. She hoped that her friend's brother would come to the ball. Ashley told Emily that she had invited Jason to the event. And Ashley, against all odds, secretly continued to love Jason all this time. And now the girl is already in the auditorium where the New Year's Eve ball has begun. She looks around, hoping to see her lover. Ashley nervously corrects the gatherings on her cornflower-colored dress. The girl had seen this outfit in the store a long time ago, and her mother went to meet her needs and bought it without paying for utilities. Ashley knew about all this, and when the purchase was made, she was nervous because she knew how sensitive they were to late payments. But she wasn't thinking about that now. She wanted to see Jason and to win him over with her appearance. For some reason, she was sure that would happen. Ashley was not fooled in her expectations. Slow music started playing and the DJ announced a white dance. A classmate approached the girl to ask her to dance. Ashley smilingly wanted to point out that the ladies were now choosing the suitors while agreeing. As she suddenly noticed Jason, who had just walked into the auditorium with a buddy. Ashley smiled at her classmate and bluntly refused the offer to dance. The girl fixed her blonde curls, headed toward Jason, walked up to the young man, smiled radiantly, and spoke amiably. "Perhaps tonight your highness will indulge us in a dance at the New Year's Eve ball." Jason looked at the girl, although he saw her at school every day, but on weekdays she seemed to him to be an ordinary schoolgirl who was not different from her peers. Basically, the guy just didn't pay attention to Ashley. But at that moment, she stood in front of him, as if she were a chic woman who had stepped off the cover of a fashion magazine. Jason looked at Ashley and couldn't understand how in one day she could transform herself so much. He couldn't help but voice his thoughts aloud. "You're like a fairy tale, from an ugly duckling to a beautiful swan. I can't believe I'm standing in front of Ashley, the same Ashley who's been bugging me for years with her crushes. Are you going to grumble or dance with me when the music stops?" he said with a smile. Ashley didn't say anything else, but simply stepped toward Jason. Soon the couple was dancing. Ashley couldn't believe that she was being embraced by the man she'd dreamed of for so many years, that he would notice her in some way. And Jason continued to marvel at how much his sister's friend had changed. The dance ended. Ashley hurried over to Emily. Jason tried to hold her back, but she just smiled back and headed toward her friend. Emily winked at her friend, but she waved back and sat down on a bench. The music in the room was energetic. Ashley watched the dancers and occasionally glanced at Jason, who was also watching her. At one point she looked at the guy again, but he was gone. She looked around confused as she suddenly heard the DJ's announcement. "This beautiful tune one man dedicates to a beautiful girl named Ashley and asks her to dance." Before Ashley realized what was being said, Jason appeared in front of her and held out his hand. Jason offered to dance again, and soon the couple was dancing to a beautiful melody. They danced together more than once that night, and when the New Year's Eve ball was over, Jason volunteered to walk them home. The couple walked down the snowy road, holding hands. At first they were silent, unable to find the right words. But when they reached the girl's house, Jason suddenly turned Ashley toward him and said quietly, "Will you be my girlfriend?" Ashley laughed, then showed her boyfriend her tongue and hurried toward the house. Jason frowned. "I don't see what's so funny. I'm serious." After he said that, the girl stopped and then walked leisurely back toward Jason. Once next to him, she looked into his eyes and whispered, "Do you know how much I want to tell you right now? How long have I waited for you to notice me? I've endured your friends' taunts, your condescending attitude toward me, as if I were a juvenile who couldn't be taken seriously. And now you're just offering to be your girlfriend. How do I know tomorrow it won't be another joke to amuse my friends?" "Ashley, what are you talking about? Yeah, there was a time when I made fun of you, but this is serious. I really want you to be my girlfriend, and I promise that no one will hurt you now." Ashley smiled, waved, and headed home. Jason didn't stop her. Once inside, the girl was greeted by Mary's mother, who saw who was seeing her daughter off. Mary asked how the ball had gone, but all she heard in response was, "Fine." The woman came over and hugged her daughter gently, but Ashley suddenly snuggled into her shoulder and cried. Mary held her tighter against her, and when she calmed down a little, she said softly, "Jason's been paying attention to you. And you don't believe him? Or is there another reason you're crying?" For you, Jason was like conquering a summit. Ashley was going for it. And this is the finale. What's he got going for him? Mammoth, what are you saying? I really love Jason. What finale? Ashley shouted indignantly and broke free from her mother's embrace. It was at that moment that the mother realized that her daughter had actually fallen in love with the guy. The woman only softly mouthed in response, "That's how you know what the feeling is. Look, just don't lose your head." The next day, Jason met Ashley after school and then walked her home. And from that day on, the two began to see each other differently. They tried to meet at every spare moment to be together. A month later, Jason confessed his love for the girl. Time passed, and Jason graduated from high school, after which he was soon drafted into the army. Ashley knew perfectly well that the lover initially wants to serve, wait until he turns 18, and after that to sign. The girl was not against the decision of the chosen one. Especially the decision of the guy pleased Jason's parents and Ashley's mother, who wanted the young people not to hurry with a trip to the registry office. Jason served and returned home. He enrolled in college and Ashley was in the 11th grade. Young people continued to meet and dreamed that soon they would become a married couple, which soon happened. As soon as the girl graduated from high school and she turned 18, the couple legalized the relationship. Ashley enrolled in college at the commodity manager. The newlyweds moved in with Mary. The woman insisted on it. Life itself slowly flowed further. Initially graduated from the school Jason, who got a job immediately on specialty. Afterward, Ashley received a specialty. She, too, got a job. Now the young woman dreamed that they had a child. But several years passed, and she could not get pregnant. Ashley became anxious about it. She was examined, as well as her husband, and soon Ashley received the verdict that she and her husband had different Rh factors, and it would be difficult to conceive a child. The doctor also added, "In your case, getting pregnant under this circumstance will not be easy. I can add that the probability of conceiving a baby is equated to 20% out of 100. However, you can do IVF. That is my advice to you." Ashley was dumbfounded by the doctor's news, but she didn't lose hope and offered her husband to do the required procedure. The young woman piously believed that her spouse would agree to it, but Jason took the proposal of his wife in the bayonet. The man responded by saying everything should be like a normal married couple, without the intervention of any newfangled procedures. Ashley had a hard time with her spouse's answer, but she didn't want to contradict it. She still hoped that the doctors might have made a mistake. The young woman had even enrolled in medical school by correspondence. Ashley now wanted to become a midwife to figure out for herself why she could not get pregnant from her loved one. However, due to the fact that the lady could not conceive a child, scandals began to occur in the family. Jason, if initially veiledly accused his wife that she could not have children, then soon began to openly accuse the chosen one that she was empty. All the excuses of Ashley, who said that she could not get pregnant not only because of her fault, were reduced to zero. Jason blamed only his wife. Soon the man began to stay late at work. Ashley was worried, nervous. She did not want to lose her favorite person. However, family life imperceptibly shipwrecked, and one day Jason came home and began to pack his things. Ashley watched her husband in silence at first, and then she mumbled, "What are you doing? Can't you see? I'm leaving you. I have a woman. I'm sorry, she's expecting a baby. You have to realize we're not right for each other. It happens. I'm sorry. But we've only been together 4 years. Other couples have been together for decades and they don't have kids. And then a baby is born. Maybe you're right. But there's one thing. There's another woman expecting a baby from me, and she doesn't have to wait 10 years to get pregnant. Ashley and Jason should get a divorce, as each of them would be better off with a separate life. I'm sorry, but I have to explain to you the simple truth when you yourself understand everything perfectly well," the woman replied quietly, realizing that it was pointless to hold her husband back. He had made up his mind. Ashley looked sadly at her spouse after these words and left the house. She didn't want to see the man she loved packing his things to leave for good, which soon happened. A month passed after Jason left his wife. During that time, he came to Ashley's house only once to pick up the rest of his belongings and to tell her that he had filed for divorce. Ashley took it calmly, realizing that nothing could be changed. She only wished her ex-husband a happy farewell. Time passed. 3 years passed after the divorce. During this time, Ashley graduated from medical school, got a job in a hospital. Personal life of a young woman did not add up, although representatives of the stronger sex tried to look after her. However, Ashley was indifferent to the attention of men. Her mother was worried about this and repeatedly said, "Daughter, you can't do this. You do not think about your personal life. So many years have passed after the divorce, and you do not even want to accept the courtship of a decent man. I'm talking about Max, who lives across the street. He's been trying to get your attention for months. And you're not paying attention, Mom, you're not paying attention. Can we not start your favorite topic about my personal life?" Ashley said irritably and looked at her mother reproachfully. Mary shook her head sadly in response. A little over a month after her conversation with her mother, Ashley was coming home after work. She wondered if she really should accept her neighbor's advances. The woman went over the merits of her beau in her mind. Ashley was so engrossed in her thoughts that she didn't immediately hear the question. She looked at the brunette and said softly, "Yes, did you say something?" "I asked you where Takaya Street 63 was. You're going the wrong way. You need to turn left, and then a few houses later, another left." After that, Ashley was interrupted by a laughing stranger. "I've never been sent this far in my life. Why don't you have some time and draw me a route on a piece of paper?" "I'd rather walk you than draw it," Ashley said with a smile. "Can I really expect such a beautiful woman to be my guide? This is my lucky day, and I have good luck in all things," exclaimed the stranger cheerfully. Ashley didn't answer, turned the other way and walked away. The man followed her, telling her why he was in this town. From the story of the new acquaintance, who introduced himself as Alex, Ashley learned that he came here for construction, rented a place on an ad, and earned a little money. Ashley also learned that Alex was married when he was 30 years old, but the family life did not work out, and he and his wife separated by mutual consent. Hearing about the divorce, Ashley involuntarily remembered the breakup with her ex-husband. She thought that she had no relationship left with Jason after the divorce. The ex-spouse had simply packed up and disappeared from her life. The woman only heard news about him from his sister. Thinking about it, Ashley smiled sadly, which didn't escape her new acquaintance. "Why are you sad?" "I guess I'm not a good conversationalist," he said. "It's all right, we're almost there. Now you need to turn into the alley, and there you will find the right house. We are happy to help you. Let's say goodbye." "Wait, I'm not ready to let you go right away," Jason said. "Why don't you let me meet you? Or is there another way? I'll have fun now, and then you can take me to a better cafe where we can continue talking. I have to work today and I'm a little tired." "Yes, and you from the road need a break." "Whatever you say," Ashley said. "Let me give you my phone number and we'll call tomorrow and you can tell me where to go. One more thing. Why don't we go back to being on a first-name basis?" "Okay," she replied politely, then dictated her phone number and waved her hand to her new acquaintance. She turned around and hurried home. When Ashley got home, her mother came to her and anxiously asked why she was late after work. The woman hugged her mother affectionately and told her about the encounter. "Honey, what's wrong with you?" Mary exclaimed fearfully. "Were you sensible when you went with a stranger alone to see him off? What if this man was a criminal, and it was a planned operation to rob you, or even worse?" "Mom, don't panic," Ashley stopped her. "We live in the 21st century. First of all, I'm not beautiful enough to make a man want me at first sight. Second, I don't look like I have a lot of money. You can see it in my clothes, I don't wear brand name clothes. And third, Jason doesn't look like a gangster. I hope you're convinced by my arguments." Still, it was reckless. Mary sighed. "Promise me you won't do it again." "I will, Mommy," she said with a smile and hugged her mother. A few days later, Ashley met with Jason. The couple chose a small, cozy cafe to talk. The young people made an order, and then Jason asked her how things were going on the personal front. She laughed contagiously when she heard the question, and Jason was puzzled by it. "Your question about my personal life was inappropriate for the situation," Ashley explained. "If I had a boyfriend or was married, would I be sitting with you right now? Of course not. Let's just say that I was married at one time. But it didn't work out for the same reasons you are. We drifted apart. So I'm waiting for my prince to appear on the horizon. Could that be you?" "I don't know. It's too early to tell," Jason said. "It's only the second time we've seen each other. And we don't know each other. I want to tell you right away that I'm not going to get you into bed right now. Sex isn't the most important thing to me when I'm with a woman, although I don't deny that it's important too." "That's honesty," Ashley said thoughtfully and turned the conversation to another direction. After that date, the couple began to call and see each other frequently. 2 months after meeting Jason, Ashley introduced him to her mother. Mary was charmed by her daughter's gallant suitor and informed Ashley about it. "I like Jason myself. I think I'm in love." "That's wonderful." Her daughter smiled. "Has he proposed yet?" "No, he just said that I was his one and only. But you know that men are ready for beautiful words just to get into bed. I'm more interested in actions, not sweet talk." "Then I'll talk to him about it," Mary decided. "But don't do that. I'm going to be 30 in a couple years. Do you want to organize my personal life for me?" Mary smiled at her daughter's words. She didn't say anything in response. However, the older woman took it upon herself to talk to Jason about it. When Jason came to visit again, the landlady offered to have a private conversation with her under a plausible pretext. Jason was surprised by Mary's request. Soon the older woman and the man were sitting in the kitchen while Ashley ran to the store at that moment. Mary had specifically asked her daughter to go get the hammer so she could be alone with Jason. And as soon as Ashley closed the door behind her, the lady of the house asked, "Man, are you going to live your life as a guest? I mean, do you intend to marry your daughter? Are you just going to take me on like that?" Jason replied, bewildered, not expecting a conversation on the subject. In the meantime, Mary asked tricky questions that were directed in one direction only when Jason would propose. Jason's answers were slurred. Then he rose abruptly from his chair and said firmly, "I love your daughter, but can she and I decide when we should marry? I respect you, but I just didn't want to be told what to do and when to do it." "Jason, I'm not interfering with your relationship. It's just that you're not seeing the basics. You don't see Ashley changing from the unknown. I get the impression that your daughter is beginning to doubt your feelings for her." "Are you serious?" Jason asked, puzzled. "I couldn't be more serious. You talk to her about marriage, and then you'll understand," she said with a sad smile. A few days passed after that conversation. Mary was glowing in the kitchen. She knew that today her daughter should come with her boyfriend after work. The older woman cooked pilaf that day and pondered how much longer it would take Jason to propose. The landlady had set a table in the hall. She didn't like to huddle in the kitchen when guests came over. At the moment, Jason was still a guest to her, since he was not a groom. Mary put the plates on the table as she heard the front door open. The woman hurried into the hallway, where she saw her daughter entering with Jason. The man politely greeted the lady of the house and then handed a bouquet of scarlet roses with the words, "I have proposed to Ashley and she has agreed to be my other half. Now it's up to you. We want to hear you say your blessing." "Who else among us is taking the bait?" said the old woman with a grin in response. She winked conspiratorially at the man, which embarrassed him, for he remembered that he had recently addressed that word to the lady of the house. Meanwhile, Mary smiled cordially and said, "Of course I bless you. You young people have pleased me today. I hope that soon I will hear the guests shouting bitter." "You won't hear that, because we will quietly sign without any celebration. We're not 18 years old enough to have a big party," Ashley said quietly, glancing at the groom as if to suggest that he agree with her. Jason did. Soon the marriage took place. Jason came to live with his wife. Ashley was happy that she had found her happiness as a woman because she truly loved Jason. Her husband reciprocated. Mary, looking at the newlyweds, only wished them long happiness and health. Imperceptibly after the wedding, 2 years flew by. The couple occasionally had a few misunderstandings between them, but it concerned all everyday things, something Ashley didn't have time to do around the house or Jason. And at such times the couple expressed their discontent with each other. But such spats were settled the same day, and the couple went to bed reconciled. Ashley was satisfied with everything in her life except one thing: she couldn't get pregnant. Every day she called herself an outcast more and more often. One day, coming home after her shift, she walked into her bedroom, threw herself on the bed, and burst into bitter tears. Her mother came to the crying and sat down next to her daughter. The elderly woman guessed the cause of her tears. She stroked her daughter's head affectionately and said quietly, "Why are you getting upset? Don't cry, my girl. Apparently it's not yet your time to be a mom." "What are you talking about? What time is it? I'm already 30. Soon I won't even know what pregnancy is. I know labor is when a baby is born. But what if my husband comes a year from now and tells me he has a woman expecting a child with him? I've been there before. What do you say to that, Mom?" First of all, calm down. Don't think about your ex-husband. He probably didn't love you enough to look outside of you. And as for Jason, he's not that kind of man. Jason loves you. I can see the way he looks at you and would do anything to make you happy with him. If he's willing to do anything, why not get checked out by the doctors? I've told him that more than once, and Jason just looks at me with sadness, Ashley tearfully told her mother. He looks that way because it's impossible to talk to you about this topic. Jason actually wants to get a checkup. There's nothing wrong with his health, but he's not talking about it for one reason only. Jason's worried that you're stressing yourself out about not being pregnant. That's your reason. Think about it. Why is your husband keeping quiet about the checkup? Ashley stopped crying after her mother's words and thought for a moment. She was silent for a while, thinking about what she had heard, and then she turned to her mother, suddenly buried her face in her chest, and said quietly, "You can't imagine how bitter I feel now. I thought I was suffering alone, but it turns out that you are also worried about me. And also, Mom, it's getting harder for me to go to work every day." Let's take today's case, for example. We had a young girl admitted a few days ago. She just turned 18. She gave birth to a boy today. And now she's giving up her son because her boyfriend doesn't want children. You know how jealous I am. You can't even imagine. She's lucky enough to be a mom. Even in a situation where her boyfriend doesn't want kids. I'd have a baby if I were her. I'd give the guy my resignation. That's what I told her today. But she told me to stay out of her personal life. Daughter, don't try that girl's situation on yourself. You have your life, she has hers. Now try to just calm down, or Jason will come over and worry about you. Okay, thanks for the support. I needed it, her daughter said quietly. Life slowly moved on. It had been 3 years since Ashley's wedding. The woman no longer hoped that she would ever become a mother, but she still had that hope in her heart. However, Ashley did not say it out loud. On the contrary, she told her husband more and more often that their family was incomplete. These statements only caused Jason more heartache, for he knew how much she dreamed of having children. When the conversation about the family being incomplete, Jason couldn't stand it and angrily asked his wife to shut up. Ashley, hearing her husband's tone, was frightened, because in such a way her husband had never allowed her to talk to him like that. When Ashley's first shock passed, the woman said, "All this is because I can't give you an heir. Stop it, please. That's not what I'm tired of. It's that you're making an issue out of the wrong place. I understand that you dream of having a child, as every woman does. But why do you keep talking about it? We've only been living for 3 years, which means we have to wait a while longer." Before the husband could finish his sentence, he was angrily interrupted by his wife. "Shut up. My first husband said the same thing to me." And what happened in the end? He found a woman who bore him a son. He didn't cheat while he was still married, all because I couldn't get pregnant. And that was the only reason I went to medical school, to become a midwife back in the day. To find out the real reason why I couldn't have children. Wait, but you told me that your divorce was because, as they say, you didn't get along. I lied. And now you know the truth and you can roll. I'm not holding you, Ashley yelled hysterically. She was about to throw their family picture at her husband as her mother Mary entered the room. Mary gave her daughter a stern look and then quietly asked Jason to leave. The man didn't object and complied with his mother-in-law's request. Once the older woman was alone with her daughter, she sat up to Ashley and spoke softly. "Aren't you ashamed of throwing a tantrum here? I understand that you're nervous, but what does this have to do with your husband? You're torturing yourself and him. Do you want that? Enjoy your life. You love each other, and you'll still have a daughter, take my word for it." "But when, Mom?" "I said she will, so she will. We just have to be patient." I've heard those words many times before. How long do I have to wait? The gynecologist told me that everything is fine with my husband's health too. But I'm still not getting pregnant after saying that. Ashley abruptly got up from the couch and ran out of the room. Immediately she ran into her husband Jason, who was looking at her with a sad look. The woman walked briskly toward the exit. Jason wanted to follow, but his mother-in-law stopped him, saying, "Don't follow Ashley. Let her get some fresh air, let her calm down. And in a motherly way, I suggest you go to church with your wife and pray. Ashley's already been there. I suggest you both go. Trust me, Jason, it won't cost you anything." "Okay, Mary," Jason replied. Some time passed. Ashley was at work in a pensive mood. The woman's thoughts were preoccupied with the fact that her menstrual cycle had gone astray. Ashley's pensive mood was noticed by the doctor on duty and asked what was going on with her. Ashley was embarrassed by the question but still told what was bothering her. The medical officer laughed upon hearing the answer and said reproachfully, "I marvel at you, woman. Take you at least, Ashley. Where do you work?" "In a maternity hospital. A midwife." "Exactly. When symptoms like these arise, where should a woman go? And given that you're also a medical professional, what are your thoughts?" "Okay. You don't have to answer that. I can see by the look on your face that the answers to the questions have occurred to you. Let's go. I'd better check you out." After a while, Ashley came out in a happy mood. The doctor informed her that she was pregnant. Upon learning the wonderful news, Ashley immediately called her spouse and then her mother. Soon she was registered at the antenatal clinic. The woman spent the first trimester in the hospital. Then the pregnancy developed without complications. And soon Ashley gave birth to a baby girl at term. The newly married parents named their daughter Amber. The couple was in the seventh heaven of happiness that they had a child. Rejoiced at this event and Ashley's mother. The woman immediately noticed that after the birth of her daughter, as if blossomed. This was noticed not only by Mary but also by neighbors, who at every opportunity said to the elderly woman how Ashley has become more beautiful after the birth of her daughter. She's glowing from the inside out with happiness. "We're so happy for you." "Thank you," Mary replied, and immediately recited the Lord's Prayer to herself. The old woman was afraid that with such words people might inadvertently jinx her daughter's happiness. Meanwhile, Ashley was enjoying her new role as a mom. She enjoyed fussing with her baby, singing songs, putting on her baby's cradles, feeding her baby formula from a bottle. Ashley did her best to take care of her daughter, which sometimes frustrated her mother. Mary also wanted to nurse her granddaughter, so she would occasionally say to her daughter with a sad smile, "You're like a hen. You don't let anyone near you. And I am not a stranger to the baby. I want to babysit the baby too." "Oh, Mom, Amber is my little angel. And I'm just afraid to part with her even for 5 minutes," Ashley replied. Time passed and the girl turned 3. Mary started talking about putting Amber in kindergarten. Ashley immediately flatly refused the offer, which caused her mother's bewilderment. The old woman looked at her daughter with incomprehension and said that the child needed to start contact with her peers. Ashley, hearing her mother's words, replied that she would go with her daughter to the playground where the kids were walking. Mary did not insist any further, realizing that Ashley would not be persuaded. After that conversation, a couple months flew by. Ashley walked with Amber in the public garden. The woman watched her daughter digging in the sand with her peers. Suddenly, Amber grabbed a child's shovel and knocked the girl on the head with it. The little girl cried and ran to her mother. Ashley felt bad about her daughter's behavior and approached Amber to reprimand her. Frowning her eyebrows, the mother said, "Girls." Ashley was outraged at her daughter Amber's behavior in the sandbox. She took the trowel from her and gave it to another girl, apologizing. Ashley then said the walk was over, which displeased Amber. At home, Ashley told her husband Ben what had happened. Mary, Ashley's mother, upon hearing the story, stated this is still the flowers. The berries will come later. What you don't realize, Ashley, is that your daughter lives a reclusive life and thinks everything should be done just for her. You lack discipline, and as a mother, you're indulging your child in everything. Can't you see that the girl is turning into a little selfish girl? What are you talking about, Mom? Amber is a wonderful girl. You're just looking for faults in her that aren't really there, Ashley replied. Mary turned reproachfully to her son-in-law, Ben. Why don't you say something? Amber is your daughter, too. Don't you notice anything strange about her behavior? Ben grumbled and hurried away so as not to continue the conversation. In the evening, Ashley put her daughter to bed and then joined her husband in the bedroom. Maybe Mom is right about Amber growing up selfish. After all, sometimes she doesn't ask, she demands to buy this or that toy, she said thoughtfully. I don't know what to answer. Maybe our daughter needs a little brother or sister, Ben suggested. Well, let's do that now, he said with a smile as he hugged his wife. Honey, I'm serious. Maybe we really should listen to Mom and put Amber in daycare, Ashley replied. You know, I agree with that. Mary is retiring soon. Her allowance will be small. Our family budget is going to become quite paltry, and we need to repair the roof, its finances. If you get a job, we'll have extra income, Ben reasoned. A couple weeks later, Amber was enrolled in kindergarten, and Ashley went straight to work. At first, Amber was cranky and refused to go to daycare, complaining about her stomach or her leg. Lily believed it at first, but then realized that her daughter was being sly to avoid going to daycare. Ashley had a hard time convincing Amber to attend. When Amber stopped being cranky, other problems began. Caregivers complained about her behavior, saying she was acting arrogant and hurting other children. Ashley gave her daughter educational talks, but the complaints continued. Once again, when Ashley came to pick up Amber, the kindergarten teacher said Amber is an insufferable child. She doesn't get enough belt training. What did you say? With a belt? Are you out of your mind? You have a teacher's education. Ashley was outraged. How can you even mention the belt? I'm doing preventive counseling with my daughter at home. But you, too, should be helping me so that the girl adapts to her peers. Talk to the child and tell her that what she's doing is wrong. And if you and I do not find a common language, then I will have to appeal to your management. After this conversation between Ashley and the teacher, the complaints stopped, and after a while, Amber was eager to go to kindergarten. Life slowly moved on. Ashley now dreamed of having a second child. She wanted to give her husband an heir. However, time passed, and the woman could not get pregnant. One evening, Ashley talked to her mother and said that she dreamed of having a second child. Mary sighed sadly after her daughter's words and sadly said, I'll let you in on a secret. Basically, Amber is your only child, and there won't be any others. Why is that? It's because we're on our third generation of having only one child, and it's necessarily a girl. That was my grandmother's, then my mom's, and then mine. I wanted to have at least 3 too, but God gave me only you. It's an ancient prejudice. You could say it's a coincidence, though. Don't take hope away from me. I'm bound to have more. I'm sorry, daughter, I probably shouldn't have told you that. I don't want to take away your dream. I just thought you should know about it. The older woman sighed heavily and actually regretted her words. Time moved on imperceptibly, and it was about to be her 6th birthday when suddenly Mary felt sick. The woman was washing dishes in the kitchen when she felt a severe headache. The pensioner, writhing from the spasm, hurried to the kitchen cabinet, which stored medicines. However, the woman did not have time to get a pill, as she lost consciousness. Ashley discovered Mary when she returned from daycare with her daughter. The woman, seeing her mother lying on the floor, cried out desperately and rushed to her mom. Amber, hearing her mom scream, cried frightened. Meanwhile, Ashley tried to bring the pensioner to her senses, but she was unsuccessful, and then she called an ambulance. Soon Mary was hospitalized. Ashley waited for the hospital with visits. She wanted to know what was wrong with her mother. When the woman went to the doctor once again, the doctor quietly said the cancer is brain cancer. I can't say anything else, as I am not a specialist in this case. I have other specifics. You need to get to a specialized clinic as soon as possible." "How so?" whispered the woman, who couldn't believe what the medical professional had just told her. That same evening, Ashley told her spouse about everything. The couple began to consider where they could find a decent amount of money to travel to the regional city. Ben suggested taking out a loan, but his wife didn't refuse. Soon Mary was taken to the regional city by her daughter. The elderly woman lay for a while in the hospital, and then Ashley came for her, who hoped that everything was not so terrible. However, the doctor's words shocked her. Stage 4. So what's wrong with that? It's not like it's a verdict. People live at this stage. You told me you're a medical professional. It's not for me to tell you what stage 4 is. Yes, people live at that stage, but the only question is how long they live. There's one thing I don't understand about your situation. How could you, a medical professional, allow your mother to have such a neglected disease? Mom rarely complained of headaches, and if she did say she had a headache, she added that it was the magnetic storms. They affect her that way, Ashley replied, hiding her face in her palms and crying desperately. The doctor put his arm around the visitor and said, "I understand your condition, but you should pull yourself together now, as you need to go to your mom. And I don't think Mary will be happy when she sees her daughter crying. Wait, shouldn't we go to the Capitol?" The man in the white coat looked sadly at the lady, then shrugged his shoulders. And then the doctor went to the table, where there was a decanter, and poured water into a glass. And only after a few moments the visitor uttered, "Hope dies last." It's a folk saying. If it makes you feel better, go to Washington. They have better equipment there. But I'm not sure they'll give you a cure that'll get your mom back on her feet in no time. If I were you, personally, I would spend the money not to buy expensive drugs that won't help, but to make my mom's last days happy. Knew what she wanted, and would fight to fulfill mom's dream. And if mom asks to prolong her life, then how would you fulfill your mom's wish? Ashley asked in a low voice and looked at the doctor point blank. The man hummed uncertainly, and after a few seconds he said, "I'd buy regular vitamins at the drugstore and give them to my mom. But at the same time I would tell her that these vitamins prolong life. But you would not fulfill your mother's wishes, but only make an appearance. Sometimes the appearance is life-extending." Soon the lady picked up her mother from the hospital and came home with her. The woman told her husband about the conversation with the doctor, as well as the desire to go to Washington, to which the spouse replied, "Don't you think the doctor was right when he said that the Capitol is unlikely to help anymore? You watch TV and see when celebrities are diagnosed with cancer, and public people spend fabulous money. And what's the result? Are you saying we should just give up and watch mom go quietly to the grave?" "I'm not saying that. Don't twist my words. I'm just trying to make the point that Mary should be at home, not in a hospital room. I don't know how much longer my mother-in-law has left to live, but I'd like her to feel peaceful and uncomfortable." "All right, so be it." Mary lived only 2 months after her hospitalization. It happened early one morning when the sun was just coming out. The daughter, who had been sleeping with her mother lately, found out that the person she loved was no longer in the world. At first, Ashley felt guilty for not realizing in time when her mother complained of headaches. Ben tried to reason with his wife to stop tormenting herself. However, after such support, the woman went into a screaming fit. And when once again Ashley blamed herself for not looking after her mother, the head of the family said, "You're getting paranoid. Stop being hysterical and let it go. Don't you realize you're becoming toxic? It's all because of your speculation. You're not just hurting yourself, you're hurting me and my daughter. You don't understand anything. I'm a medical professional, and I should have responded to Mom's complaints. And I didn't. And as a result, Mom is no longer alive. It's my fault she passed away so early. Oh, honey, you're really getting on my nerves. Why don't you stop beating yourself up? I think you should take a vacation with your daughter right before Amber starts first grade. Get some rest and relaxation. I'd go with you, but I don't have vacation until October. What do you think of my offer?" asked the husband and hugged his wife, who was still sobbing. The woman only nodded in response. She no longer had the strength to argue with her husband. Soon Ashley and her daughter left on a trip to the Gulf Coast. The woman was glad that Ben had insisted on the trip. Ashley spent a week at the sea with her daughter, and now it was the last day. Before leaving, Amber asked her mom to go to the beach one last time to admire the sea. Ashley did not refuse the child, and soon mother and daughter were already walking barefoot on the soft golden sand. Every now and then the girl ran to the water to touch the water with her toe. Ashley was watching her daughter when someone called her name. The woman looked back in bewilderment and saw her ex-husband Jason walking toward her. Ashley stared at him in amazement. Jason approached the woman and said hello in a friendly manner before mouthing, "Taking a vacation. I heard from my sister that you have a daughter. Congratulations, you've been dreaming of having kids." "Thank you. So many years have not seen each other, although we live in the same city. But we met at the sea. Listen, let's go sit in a cafe and talk. You and I have a lot to remember. You haven't changed a bit since the baby was born. You're just as petite as before. I'd love to reminisce with you about our pranks in bed. Thank you for the invitation, but I must refuse you. My daughter and I are leaving today, and you'd be better off with your wife, because I have a man I love, and I'm not attracted to the side, unlike you," Ashley replied softly, disgusted by her ex-husband's tone about intimacy. Meanwhile, Jason frowned and said wistfully, "We're not making love to my wife right now. She's 2 months away from giving birth, and she's blown to smithereens. I told my husband to terminate the pregnancy. After all, there are already 2 children, and she said that she will give birth to a 3rd. So it's wonderful that you have so many children. Children are happiness. But I just don't understand why you walk on the beach without your soulmate and children. My wife's at home, and I'm here on business, like on a business trip. My father-in-law's a businessman. So he sent me down here for a couple days. Well, good luck with your business. We should get going with our daughter," Ashley said quietly and beckoned her daughter over to her. The woman took the girl's hand and they headed towards the exit of the beach. Ashley walked at that moment and thought how lucky Jason's wife was to already have 2 children and to be carrying a baby under her heart at this time. Soon Ashley and her daughter arrived home. They were gushing over Ben about what a wonderful time they had. Amber took a handful of sand out of her backpack to make her daddy happy. Ashley laughed when she saw it. Her husband looked at his wife in bewilderment, but she was even more amused when she saw Ben's amazed face. When the first emotions from the sand had passed, Ashley explained the reason for her laughter. She told her husband that she had hidden something in her backpack the night before she left. Ashley hadn't thought much of it at the time, but as she put her daughter's backpack on her shoulders, she wondered why it was so heavy. Ben, still not realizing anything, looked into his daughter's backpack and immediately chuckled, and through a fit of laughter turned to his daughter. "You wanted so much to please Daddy that you stuffed the whole backpack with sand. That's a good girl to please your father. So you were sunbathing in the sun like me and Mom. And now you can fill a trough with water, pour sand on the ground next to it. And it's like you're having a vacation at the sea. It's great, isn't it? You're so good at it." "That's a wonderful idea. And Jackson Sunshine, Daddy will give you a kiss for being clever." Life moved on, and soon it was time to go to 1st grade. On the eve of that event, Ashley put her daughter to bed and headed into the hall to iron her white apron. She spread the bedspread on the board, and then laid the apron down thoughtfully and spoke softly. "How quickly time runs. You too. Our daughter is going to 1st grade tomorrow. As my mother used to tell me, it's worth it for a child to go to school. Then time will fly by after that imperceptibly." "Is that you talking to yourself?" pronounced Ben, who had just entered the room and heard his spouse's phrase. "I'm saying that you and I are getting a little old now. And you know, my mom was right when she said that all women in our line give birth to only 1 child. And it's always a girl. Oh, that's so lucky. You and me were in the prime of our lives. And as for the 1-child thing, that's just prejudice. That's what I told my mother. But you see, I can't get pregnant again." "That's all right. We still have a whole cartload of time. Drop what you're doing and let's go into the bedroom to make a baby," Ben said and winked excitedly at his spouse. Ashley smiled and said, "I was having a serious conversation with you." "And you're at it again?" "I'm being quite serious too. And about the kids, I can only say this: we have a daughter. And we should be happy about it. We need to get Amber on her feet so she can go to school and get a good life in the future. And so Amber has already started first grade. Her mother and father alternately took her daughter to and picked her up from school. The girl studied willingly, and soon parents often heard praise from the class teacher. Ashley and her husband were only happy. The first half of the year flew by. Amber became friends with a classmate. The girl's name was Christina. Friends spent a lot of time together. The parents of the girls were only happy about this friendship, which did not affect the performance at school. And now it was spring. The time of summer vacation was approaching. Amber came home alone. She had already been released to school alone after the winter. The girl came home and went to her room without greeting her mother, who was busy in the kitchen. Ashley was curious as to why her daughter had done that. The woman wiped her hands on a towel and proceeded to the nursery, where she saw her upset daughter. The homeowner approached the girl and asked what had happened. Amber glanced glumly at her mom and immediately, almost tearfully, said, "Christina, her parents bought her rollerblades, as well as a helmet, elbow pads, and knee pads. I want to go rollerblading in the summer too." "And what are you getting upset about? Daddy will come over and talk to him about it." "It's all words. Dad already promised me a bicycle." "And what? He bought a junk bike. It's a shame to even ride it in the yard. Dad bought me the bike I pointed out in the store, and then suddenly I needed another one. He said, ride this one first, and then you can get another bike. I don't need a bike now. I want rollerblades." In the evening, Ben came home from work, as his daughter immediately ran up to him and asked him to buy rollers. The head of the family, after a little thought, promised his daughter to make the purchase. Ashley heard the answer. The spouse did not interfere in the conversation between father and daughter. However, when Amber went to bed, Ashley emphatically stated that she was against the purchase. Ben looked at his wife in amazement and asked, "Why do you disapprove of rollerblading?" "She's too young for the sport. Amber is a girl, not a boy. It's more appropriate for her to play with her dolls, not run around on those rollerblades like tomboys everywhere." "Wait, honey, you know what kids are like these days. Girls only play dolls in kindergarten, and once they go to school, their priorities change. And anyway, how can you imagine our daughter's friend rollerblading and Amber looking at her with envy? It's a very interesting picture. And if Christina bought a live tiger tomorrow, would you run out and buy that animal for your daughter too? Why make it so complicated?" "Okay, if you promised your daughter, then buy the rollers. But I warn you right away that you will walk with Zlata when she starts to learn to ride them." "Whatever you say, my queen." Ashley ah-hed when she heard the sum. However, the woman glanced at her daughter, who was looking at the roller skates with wild delight. Afterward, Ashley smiled at her spouse and said, "Look at how happy our daughter is about these rollerblades. As they say, what's a little something for a child to be happy about? Okay, go outside and try out the accessories and then tell us about the progress." The time went on its own. At first, Ben accompanied his daughter and her friend on outings after work. And then, when Amber became more confident on rollers, the family decided that the girl would ride only in the park and never on the roadway. Amber happily agreed to this proposal, as she was already tired of her dad accompanying her. And Christina's father does not do it. June and then July flew by. Ashley was coming home from her shift. She rode on the shuttle bus and smiled as she recalled her day at work. Soon the driver announced a stop. The woman got out of the vehicle and headed to the nearest store to buy milk and eggs. Ashley was going to make an omelet for dinner. The woman had already approached the store when she heard her spouse calling her. Ashley turned around and asked what he was doing here. Ben smiled and pronounced, "I wanted to meet you from work, but I guess I didn't time it right." "There's something you're not telling me, honey. Spill what happened," the woman mumbled worriedly. Ben, seeing his wife's reaction, laughed and immediately said, "It's actually our boss's anniversary. He let everyone go home early, but I wasted my time and cooked dinner at home myself. And then I saw that there was no bread at home and hurried to the store, where I saw you. And I thought something had happened to my daughter," Ashley said, relieved. Then she smiled and said, "Let your boss have a holiday every day then. I'll be spared the cooking then." Imagine how happy that would be for a woman. By the way, I forgot to ask, what did you cook? "Flotsam pasta is my specialty." You know very well that cooking is not my business. That's what I have you for. Now you tell me how your day at work went." Ashley looked lovingly at her husband. Then she told him that she'd had a hard day at work. He asked why it had been tiring at work. Ashley smiled and said, "Although it's a hard day, it's a joyful one. A woman gave birth to triplets today. Imagine. She's 38 years old and this is her first labor. You should have seen this woman in labor when she was given her first baby in her arms. That woman's eyes were full of happiness. That's the first time I've seen eyes like that in so many years. And the funniest thing is that when she was transferred from the labor room to the ward, she began to wonder how she would feed 3 babies because she had only 2 breasts. Our medical staff, everyone who was in the ward, just fell down laughing. They found something to laugh about. If I were a woman, I might be interested in that question too. Although, I admire our woman in labor because she gave birth at 38. And you've given up on the whole thing. We should do the same thing tonight, as soon as we put our daughter to bed. And maybe don't even hint to me that you had a hard day's work or a headache. You won't get away from me today," he said with a smile. "Let's go home then. Can't wait to taste your specialty," said the wife with a laugh and took her husband under her elbow. And so it was already the end of August. School was a few days away. Amber walked up to her mom and asked to go for a walk. Ashley had the day off today. She glanced out the window and then turned to her daughter. "It's okay to walk, but just no rollerblades." Amber frowned and immediately inquired, "Why no rollerblades?" "The weather's turning bad. It's supposed to rain. Maybe you and Christina can sit with us today and play on the laptop," Mom replied. So much for Mom's idea. There were only a few days left until school started, and then there would definitely be no time to go for a ride. "Mom, let me go. Christina and I will skate carefully, as always." "Mom, you're the best in the world. My favorite. You know I can't refuse you when you ask me to. Go on, take a walk," said the woman and kissed her daughter on the top of her head. As soon as the girl jumped out of the door, the woman felt a vague uneasiness in her soul. Ashley was about to run out after her daughter and call her home when her cell phone rang. The woman was distracted by the phone call and then went out into the yard. But her daughter was not there, of course. It had been about 2 hours since Amber had gone for a walk. Ashley still felt a heaviness in her soul. The woman dialed her daughter and asked how they were doing. Amber cheerfully replied that everything was fine and immediately disconnected the connection. Hearing her daughter's voice made Ashley feel a little calmer. Another hour passed before Amber left for her walk. Ashley started the laundry. She pulled out her daughter's terrycloth robe as there was a loud knock on the door. At the same time, the woman heard Christina crying. Ashley hurried to the door, and as soon as she opened it, she saw Christina's crying face. The landlady asked anxiously, "What happened?" "Amber was hit by a car," she said through her sobs. "I came straight to you." "What do you mean, hit by a car? What are you talking about? Where's Amber?" "They took her away in an ambulance," Christina said through sobs. Ashley sucked in air with her mouth and then asked the girl where it had happened. When she found out where the hit and run had happened, the woman rushed to the scene of the tragedy without changing her slippers. When she got there, she saw a small crowd of gawkers, as well as a cordon of the place on the stretch of road. The woman, pushing people, rushed to the place. As soon as she got there, she saw the chalked silhouette of a child on the pavement, as well as brown bloodstains. Not far away, Ashley spotted a helmet. The helmet belonged to her daughter, and at the same moment the woman lost consciousness. Ashley woke up in the hospital. Sitting next to her was her husband Ben, who was holding her hand. As soon as Ben saw that his wife came to her senses, he immediately jumped up and ran out into the hallway, where he loudly called a nurse. A girl in a white coat hurried into the room. She approached Ashley and asked how the woman was feeling. Ashley waved her hand and wanted to get up. Her husband wouldn't let her. Then the woman asked her spouse, "What about your daughter?" "She's alive. Amber's in the ICU. The doctors are fighting for her life. Help me up. I need to be near my daughter. My presence will help her." "You just had a heart attack, and you can't get up," Ben said quietly but firmly. He wanted to add something else, but at that moment the doctor entered the room and came up to Ashley and said, "Are you awake? That's great. You're going to be given an injection, and then try to sleep. I'm not going to be here. Let's get you the papers you need to sign to refuse hospitalization." Ashley, do I really need to tell you as a medical professional what the consequences of refusing medical care are? The man in the white coat said sternly. That's exactly what I know. That is why you should not waste your precious time now and explain to me the plain truths which I already know without you. The doctor looked at Ben after the woman's words, but he only waved his hands, thus making it clear that he could not influence his spouse in this situation. And after a while, Ashley was near the entrance to the intensive care unit. She prayed to God that her daughter would survive. Ben at this time stood near the window and looked at the sill with a hateful look. Some time passed. Ashley walked over to her husband and quietly touched his elbow. The husband immediately flinched at the touch and turned to his wife. He put his arm around Ashley and then pressed the woman's head against his chest and immediately felt her crying. Ben asked her to calm down, but the woman didn't respond to her husband's words. Ben became nervous. He was worried that his wife might have a second stroke. The man wanted to run after the nurse as he was stopped by his spouse, who faintly said, "Tell me what happened." "I can't tell you much." Anyway, the girls were already rollerblading home. They needed to pass the zebra. As here Christina had a slip on her lap, she bent down to correct it, and her daughter at the same time moved across the road, and then a foreign car flew out. Amber didn't have time to react and a hit and run occurred. Christina was saved from the collision by her knee pads. Witnesses called an ambulance and police officers. The investigator told me the driver fled the scene. But he's already been arrested. He was under the influence of alcohol when he hit our daughter. Ben was silent, looked at his wife, who only clenched her hands in a fist. The woman's face had gone pale. Ashley didn't say anything, she just stood there staring at one point. The man did not know how to behave in this situation, so once again pressed his wife to him and gently said, "Everything will work out, and our daughter will still recover." "I want that bastard to get the maximum punishment," Ashley told him. "That criminal will get what he deserves. Right now I think you should go home so you can recover." "No home, our little girl needs us here." "Okay, sweetheart." It was another couple hours before 2 doctors came out of the ICU. Ashley rushed over to them and grabbed one doctor by the chest. The man in the white coat tried to pull his hands off the woman, but he was unsuccessful. And then the second doctor turned to the lady's husband. "We did everything we could here, but the girl suffered many injuries. We couldn't save her." Ashley, as soon as she heard this, pushed the doctor away, then sobbed loudly. She then turned to her husband and started beating her fists on his chest, shouting, "It's your fault. It's your fault. I was against these videos. How am I supposed to live without my little girl?" One of the doctors quickly realized that the woman was hysterical. The man in the white coat shouted something to the nurse, who came out to the noise. The lady was given an injection and soon she fell asleep. Ben was next to his wife the whole time. And as soon as the spouse woke up, she asked to take her home. The man complied with the request without any objection. Amber's funeral soon followed. All this time Ashley was in prostration. She did not understand why so many people had come to the cemetery, and also did not realize why those present were expressing their condolences to her. It wasn't until the coffin was being lowered into the hole that Ashley realized it was her baby girl being buried. The woman shrieked, ran to the coffin, wrapped both arms around it, and screamed, "Don't. I can't let my daughter go to her final resting place alone. I want to lie next to her." From the coffin, Ashley was able to tear Ben together with her father, who came to the funeral of his granddaughter. The woman was then picked up by neighbors and hurriedly taken away from the cemetery. At home, Ashley could not sit down at the table to memorialize her daughter as she became ill with heart trouble. Her spouse called an ambulance and the woman was hospitalized. Several days passed after the funeral. Ben visited his spouse daily, although it was a long drive. "We still don't know when the trial will be. Be patient, my dear, let's get better at my place," he told her. "Why should I get better if our daughter is no longer in this world?" Ashley replied. I realize that we lost our only child, but don't forget that I need you, that I love you, and I can't lose you. And Amber wouldn't want that either. Some time passed. Ashley was released from the hospital and went to work. The days seemed like torture for the woman. Ashley hated the nights most of all, as sleep was non-existent. She had fleeting visions of her daughter coming to her and asking her to punish the man who hit her. Ben saw that his wife could not find peace until she knew what punishment the driver would receive, and soon the trial took place. As it turned out, that driver was some local oligarch. The defendant got off with a fine. It was twisted to mean that Amber was crossing the road in the wrong place. Amber's testimony disappeared from the case, and a whole new set of witnesses came forward. When Ashley found out about it, she went door to door with the D.A.'s office, the police, the DMV. But everywhere she was pointed at the door. The woman was desperate, and after another visit to the investigator, she came home and drank a few shots of whitewater. Ashley literally immediately became tipsy, as strong drinks were not spoiled. When her husband came home from work, her wife said to him in an inebriated voice, "How can you live peacefully in this world when our daughter is gone because of your fault? First of all, you, my dove, are drunk. Let's talk about it tomorrow when you're sober. I want to tell you everything now. You're not really a man. The man who ruined my daughter is out there, and you didn't even lift a finger to avenge him. What can I do when money rules the world now? Don't you understand that? What do you think I should do? Go to that oligarch and throw him from the 5th floor. Would that make you feel better? Only I'd have to go to jail for it, because I don't have the money to pay him off. I'd go and throw him from the 5th floor. Maybe then my daughter would stop coming to me at night." Ben did not say anything to his wife, only took the bottle of hot drink from her hands. And afterward, the man retired to the nursery to ponder how to help his wife overcome the loss of her only daughter. Sasha did not sleep all night, and the only thing that came to his mind was to take his wife to the bishop in the church, which he soon did. After the church visit, the lady was now less often visited by her daughter in dreams. Time moved on imperceptibly, and now a year has passed since Amber was buried. During this time, the lady had hardened a bit. Whereas she used to come to work in high spirits, now she disliked women in labor. The woman did not tell anyone about it. But the team has already noticed that Ashley often rudely treats future moms. The chief Dr. Jackson Michael repeatedly made his subordinate remarks on this matter. The woman promised to correct herself, but everything was repeated again. And once Ashley, together with the doctor, delivered a woman in labor. The young woman was in labor for the first time. And when the contractions began, she screamed that she was in pain. Ashley considered the future mommy hysterical, and the words of the doctor made remarks to her, and after the birth wrote a report to the chief doctor. Jackson Michael familiarized himself with the document and called Ashley to his office. As soon as the woman entered, the master of the office seriously said, "This can't go on any longer. If before, everyone wanted you to assist in childbirth, but now women in labor, just hearing your name, frightened. Maybe you should go to the sea with your husband, get away for a while. I understand your grief that you lost a child, but our patients are not to blame. Let's find some common ground, otherwise we'll go our separate ways, even though you're an excellent midwife. Now, I want an answer from you. I'm going to reconsider how I treat my patients. I'm sorry, it won't happen again." I've heard that before. Ashley, why don't you give me one last chance? Okay? You might want to think about taking a vacation. A change of scenery for a while is good for a person, especially in your situation. Ashley came home in a gloomy mood. She went into the kitchen to make dinner, but immediately changed her mind and went into the living room, where she turned on the TV. The woman didn't watch the program at all. She was thinking about how to continue going to work. Ashley was distracted from her thoughts by her husband, who sat down next to her and said affectionately, "How was your workday? A lot of women gave birth today? Why are you interested? Honey, what's the matter with you? Actually, I've always been interested in that. Then from now on, stop doing it. How I'm sick of everything. How I'm sick of everything," said the wife nervously. Ben frowned after his wife's words and then said firmly, "Tell me what happened at work." Ashley didn't talk herself into it twice, but honestly recounted the conversation with the head doctor. Ben was silent for a long time after his wife's narration, and then asked why she had developed a dislike for laboring women. Ashley thought for a moment, and then, looking her husband in the eye, confessed. "You know, I look at their happy faces when they're presented with a baby, and it's like I get an electric shock inside. And it's because they're moms. And I'm never going to get to experience that. It's moments like that when it's like I'm possessed. I can't help it. In that case, should you quit this job? You can't force yourself to do something you don't want to do. I get the impression that you've grown to hate being a midwife and find no outlet in this job." "What do you mean quit? Do you want me to sit in four walls and slowly go insane?" "I'm not suggesting you sit at home. You could get a job as a clerk in a small store. I think you'll be able to balance your debit and credit. Or maybe we should really go on vacation somewhere in the country, take a tent, fishing rods, and spend a week in solitude. And then think about changing jobs." "Okay, let's do that, honey." Soon the couple went on vacation to Ben's father's house in the country. The couple had a great time. They often went to nature, where they fished in the lake, and then together they picked berries. Ashley then confessed to her husband that it was a pity that they did not go on vacation when Amber was alive. The husband did not answer anything to his wife, as he realized that if he said a word, his wife would start crying. A week later, the couple went back. Ben, upon arrival, asked his wife if she could go out to work in the maternity ward. Ashley replied in agreement. The woman actually believed the trip had changed her internally, and soon Ashley was on shift. The first day was fine, but after a week the same feeling of resentment returned to her. Ashley tried to fight her envy. She even pinched her arm to keep from being rude. It had been about a month since the vacation. Ashley arrived at work and mentally wished to herself that there were as few women as possible wanting to be moms today. Ashley had no idea what a difficult shift she was about to have. And it had all started when Taylor Grievna, the doctor on duty, had her daughter's fever. The young woman asked, "Check to see if you can handle it on your own today, especially with 4 hours left in the shift. Just understand I am divorced from my husband, and there is no one to look after my daughter, and I'm worried about her. She's got a fever of 38.8. She called me the other day." Taylor Grievna, go with peace of mind. I've never delivered a baby on my own, have I? And there's someone to help you if you need it. The head doctor's on call today. By the way, did you ask him to leave? Otherwise he'll ask me and I won't answer, and I'll get in trouble. Yeah, I talked to him. He's a man of the world and he recognized my situation right away. He also said that if Ashley was working, there was nothing to worry about. That head doctor of ours is flattering me. All right, go ahead, Taylor Grievna. You'll be running an even higher fever by the time you get home to your daughter. Just as Ashley escorted the woman out, a nurse announced that there were 2 women in labor. Ashley sighed to herself and hurried into the exam room. There was one middle-aged woman in there who had been brought in by ambulance. Ashley began to ask the patient questions in a businesslike manner. Just then, the head doctor entered the room and addressed the midwife. "This is going to be fun today. You're taking care of this woman, and I'm about to have a difficult labor." Ashley sighed sorrowfully and hurried to examine the woman. As soon as she saw the patient's chart, she immediately shuddered in displeasure. The woman in labor, Rachel Lionel, was 58 years old. After all the necessary procedures, the woman in labor was taken to the labor room. Ashley was clearly giving commands as to how the patient should proceed. Rachel Lionel responded by moaning and begging for the baby to be saved. Ashley was angry with the woman, unable to suppress her anger. And when the woman in labor moaned again, the midwife said angrily, "You're crazy. How could you think of giving birth at the age of 58? Now keep quiet and do as you're told." The labor was difficult. Ashley was completely exhausted. She would have been happy to have the help of the chief of medicine. But Jackson Michael was delivering triplets, and he was having a hard time with it too. And when the workday was over, Ashley breathed a sigh of relief. Now the only thing she wanted to do was come home, take a bath, and go to bed. This day she even changed her principles. She called a cab to get to her place of residence. Previously, she had not allowed herself such expenses. Soon the woman was already at home, where she was met by her husband Ben. He offered his wife to eat, but she waved away and said that she did not want anything, as the day was stressful. Afterward, Ashley said she delivered a baby for an elderly woman. Her husband whistled in surprise and said in amazement, "I can't believe what kind of women we have here." The next day at lunchtime, Ashley received a call from the chief physician, who ordered her to report to work. The woman was often called by her superiors, so she involuntarily had a thought, and whether this call is not connected with yesterday's elderly woman in labor. There was no time to ponder, however, and Ashley drove to the hospital. As soon as she got to the second floor, where the chief physician's office was, a nurse ran up to her and whispered, "Ours is out of control, vomiting and swearing." "What's the reason?" "You know, he said something about the woman in labor yesterday." The girl in the white coat wanted to add something, but then the door opened and the head doctor appeared and said, "I was just waiting for you, Ashley. Come on, let's go have a talk." The first to enter the office was the chief physician, who stood by the desk, tapping his fingers nervously on it. Ashley came in after the man, and she knew from the doctor's demeanor that he was going to get a scolding, since he was rarely this angry. As the woman closed the door, Jackson Michael came right up to her and said sternly, "What are you doing? I am well aware that today both you and I have a day off after yesterday's duty, but I get a call from a doctor saying that a woman in labor wants to get to know me. I wouldn't have responded to this request if I hadn't been told who this woman was. Do you happen to have any idea who this woman might be?" "I do," Ashley replied. "Rachel Lionel Kopylova gave birth to a baby girl." "That's right. When I went to see her, she was curious about the midwife who delivered her baby. Naturally, I asked what was wrong. Rachel wouldn't tell me what the situation was, but it was clear she wasn't happy about what you'd done. And now I'll tell you for your understanding that this woman in labor is the wife of a very famous man in the regional city. And if now we are tortured with checks, the stumbling block will be you, because your tongue says nasty things. I'd like to add that if I fire you, your husband will get it too, and so will I for that matter." "Wait a minute," Ashley said. "If this lady is the wife of a respectable man, why did she come here to give birth? Why didn't she give birth in her own town?" "You're asking me these questions?" The head doctor was indignant. "You don't understand the seriousness of the situation. I'm not interested in why Rachel ended up in our hospital." Ashley was more concerned with the aftermath of her shift. She wasn't going to rant about it. You go on your knees and beg for forgiveness, birthing girl. Basically do whatever it takes to earn her favor. The doctor gestured toward the door, letting her know that the conversation was over. Ashley walked out of the office. Her face was burning. The woman didn't know how to start a conversation with the woman in labor, whom she had insulted. Nevertheless, Ashley pulled herself together and headed toward the room. She knocked on the door and then entered. Immediately, her attention was caught by the way Rachel Lionel was admiring her newborn daughter. Ashley hesitated, letting her know she was in the room. She turned at the sound and looked at the midwife intently. "I want to apologize to you," Ashley spoke first. "I behaved inappropriately with you yesterday. I'll get down on my knees if you want me to. But please forgive me. I didn't know whose wife you were." "Don't clean it. Are you saying that if I were the wife of a locksmith or a janitor, you wouldn't feel guilty about talking to a woman in labor like that?" Rachel Lionel said sternly and looked reproachfully at the midwife. Ashley at that moment was ready to fall to the ground in shame, because she realized that she had said something stupid. But she answered nonetheless. "I wouldn't feel guilty." "Well, thank you for your honest answer. If you lied now, I'd lose the last shred of respect for you. Now tell me, why are you so rude to women in labor? Don't deny it, since I've been doing a little checking up on you around here." Ashley looked at Rachel with a sad look, and then tears ran down her cheeks. The midwife, without knowing why, told this woman how she had lost her baby, that the perpetrator had gotten off scot-free after the hit and run, and told her that she dreamed of becoming a mom, but it wasn't happening. Therefore, when women of advanced age give birth, she is filled with anger and envy. Rachel listened attentively to the interlocutor. Then she smiled sadly. She invited the midwife to sit down next to her, then took her hand and asked her to stop crying. Ashley wiped her tears away with the palm of her hand. While smearing mascara on her face, Rachel immediately held out a damp washcloth with the words, Are you now, like a lost sheep, aware of our fate? Related. At one time, I couldn't get pregnant for a long time either. And when it did happen, it was a miracle for me and my husband. My husband at that time was still a small official in the administration. And then my son grew up and against parental will, after serving in the army, went to the hot spot. My husband and I hoped that the trouble would pass us by. However, the miracle did not happen. Our boy died. We could not recover from this tragedy for a long time. But as they say, time heals. My husband moved up the career ladder, and that's when I had the idea that I could still have a child. I was examined in many clinics, but the doctors were throwing up their hands. And then came the decision to do IVF. My husband and I consulted. He is 7 years younger than me, and we came to a mutual agreement that we could take a risk. And the risk justified our expectations. We have a daughter. The main thing is that our health should be good. Ashley sat in silence after Rachel's story. The woman's story had touched something in her soul. Meanwhile, Jackson Michael paced nervously around the office, wondering if Ashley had made amends, and unable to bear it, the man strode into the room, where he saw a peaceful conversation between the women, who smiled at each other. The chief physician came out in bewilderment. The only thing he realized was that the conflict was over. Meanwhile, Ashley smiled embarrassedly and asked the question she had been wondering about the late pregnancy. It's understandable. I'm happy for you, but I just don't understand why you came to give birth in a provincial town. I didn't really want to come here, Rachel answered Lionel. But immediately, becoming serious, she continued. My husband went on a business trip to New York. I was against this trip, but my husband is still an enthusiast, likes to be in the know. My spouse was away for 2 days and should have been back by now. Then I got the call that he had a heart attack. I could not stay at home and drove myself by car to that city. However, the nervousness had taken its toll. I felt the baby wanted to be born, so your town came up. And in the morning my husband called and said that he is doing well and he will be here soon. I had to scold him and scare him that if he leaves the hospital without permission, our daughter will be taken away from the hospital. My blackmail succeeded. What a brave woman you are, Ashley said with admiration. I'm not brave. I just love my husband as much as he loves me. And yet I envy you, but with white envy. I mean, you realized your dream and became a mom. Can you do it too? You're a midwife and you know what IVF is. I do, but I'm afraid my husband wouldn't like it, Ashley said quietly. And that's where you're wrong. From your story, your husband loves you and would do anything to make you happy. My advice is to go for it. Just don't hurt any more women in labor. I give you my word it won't happen again. Meeting you and your story changed something in my soul. And you know I'm very happy about it. Too much. Andrew was in a lot of pain. Emily's pain faded into the background. She was scared out of her mind. 3 weeks passed, but Andrew still couldn't recover. He couldn't eat. He felt like he was the reason William had left the family. Andrew, it's not your fault his mother tried to convince him. It's just that your father betrayed you and me. Then I didn't listen to him. I went to play with those boys, the son cried. They were smoking. Dad found out and thought I smoked with him. He didn't forgive me. He didn't love me after that. Emily clutched her head. Andrew felt so much guilt that there seemed to be no way out of it. A month passed and Emily decided to file for divorce after all. She had gained some moral strength. William knew about it right away. He got in his car, headed for his mother-in-law and father-in-law's house. He didn't know what to do next. On the one hand, he loved Emily and his son. The latter was very dear to him, but everything in their lives had become monotonous. He wanted new impressions. He began to feel that he was getting old. Perhaps that's what drove him to adventure. Irene Alexis, Gregory Myron, his son-in-law, lowered his head. I ask you to speak to me. The father-in-law looked at him angrily. He would have loved to punch him in the face. But Irene Alexis was a mother herself. She was worried about both Emily and Andrew. Billy, she sighed. Do you realize the pain you've caused them? But what were you missing? I don't know, he shrugged. I want to apologize to Emily. I love her. I want to go back to them. I seriously doubt she'll take you back. My mother-in-law said with annoyance in her voice. But what were you thinking? You've got a mistress under your nose. But you will come back. And how will you live? Emily will see the tank all the time. We'll leave here. Suddenly declared son-in-law. There won't be any tank there. Where to? My father-in-law entered the conversation. Do you think the rumor about you will not reach there? He scolded. Anyway, Emily's parents promised to talk to her. Naturally, she didn't want to hear about her husband's return. Mom, don't tell me anything about him, she said angrily. I hate him. I'll divorce him. Emily, listen to me, Irene. Alexis tried to look at the problem from every angle. I don't care what you decide, but I'm asking you to think about Andrew. The child is suffering. And it was true. Emily burst into tears. Her heart couldn't bear the sadness of her son. He thought of his father all the time, and the fact that William hadn't shown up all this time made it worse. And then the day came when Andrew didn't come home from school. When Emily was on duty, his grandfather would pick him up, but the woman's father reported that Andrew didn't show up today. Emily called in a substitute to cover her shift. Of course, there was nothing the police could do. So they searched for Andrew on their own. Billy, Irene said excitedly to Alexis, Andrew's missing. Has he come to see you? No, he said worriedly. I'll be right over, he promised and got into the car. As much as Emily felt bad, she didn't say anything. Everyone started looking for Andrew. They found him at one of the playgrounds. Oh, my son. His mother rushed over to him. Demochka. She started kissing the child. Daddy. When he saw William, he rushed to him. Daddy, cried the boy. You could say that that incident had determined everything. As much as Emily didn't want to, she made the choice to reconcile with William because of her son. Everyone sat at Emily's parents' house and had a serious conversation. We're going to move to another town, the son-in-law said at once. Andrew didn't take a step away from him. Emily agreed. She realized that no matter how womanizer was her husband, he sincerely loved his son. Perhaps that was why William had just taken a mistress. Emily had no intention of leaving her family, but that didn't make her feel any better. Cheating was still cheating, no matter how you looked at it. 2 months later, they sold the house, and Emily and her family moved to a neighboring town, which was 70 kilometers away. They bought a small house, as it was a more promising place, and accordingly, life was more expensive. Emily got a job as a post nurse in one of the hospitals. William found a crew and started doing repairs with them. Such services were in great demand. Andrew recovered quickly, enjoyed going to his new school, and made friends very quickly. Emily's life, despite the fact that she was doing the same things as before, seemed to take a new direction. Why don't we have a baby? Her husband once said to her. A child would bring us joy. I'm not ready yet, she sighed. I've been traveling a lot in the last year, but you're already 38. Where else can I put it off? He objected. And I'm not getting any younger either. I'm already 42. You can't say Emily got married late. She was 25. It's just that her job was stressful, so you can't get pregnant right away. Let's revisit this conversation in 6 months, the wife asked. Still, Emily had her doubts. She kept thinking that the day would come when William would cheat on her again. There won't be any more cheating, she assured herself. We're fine. Why should our past determine our future? But no matter how much she set herself up for the best, her intuition told her that something was bound to happen in her life. Maybe that was the real reason Emily didn't want a second child. It was May. Emily and her family had already been living in the new place for 8 months. Everyone had gotten used to it and had no idea how they had lived in their hometown a year ago. Andrew had grown up. He had already turned 11. The boys in the new school were more advanced. The boy had somehow grown up quickly. He was very seriously interested in modeling. He and 2 of his friends went to a children's club where they built various ships in scale. Very beautiful, praised Andrew's mother. Son, how do you have the patience? She laughed. I would not be able to sit for hours and collect it all by crumbs. You know, how interesting, Andrew said proudly. We're going to exhibit in a competition." It wasn't that Andrew had grown cold to his father, but it was noticeable that he was now more interested in his friends than in his father. They still talked occasionally, especially when it came to their son's hobbies. But Emily could see that they had not become friends, and William was very tired. Sometimes there were urgent works, so that he could not even spend the night at home. And so Emily's life flowed in a new direction, and a few words about her work. In principle, the team was nothing. Emily immediately made a friend from the children's ward. The only one. The head therapist was a cold man. He even seemed stiff from the outside. And since Emily worked in his department, she still didn't understand how to communicate with him. Gregory Myron didn't seem to notice anyone. He was strict, but acted so professionally that without any doubt he could be called not only the best doctor of the hospital, but also of the whole region. Many, very many people bowed down to his talent, not that he admitted it. He paid no attention at all to rumors or anyone in his direction. He was constantly focused on his work. From the outside, it seemed that he could solve any task. There were enough instances where he alone was able to determine the true cause of an illness, and a man who was almost dying was discharged a month later. Gregory Myron didn't look like his usual self either. His hair was almost gray, but his face looked quite young. About 6 months later, Emily learned that he was only 47. It was Emily's shift when the doctor approached her. He looked concerned. "Emily," he said, "I need to pick you up for about an hour. I'll get Annie to keep an eye on the post. We're going to see a patient in 20 minutes. Be ready." Emily nodded. She rushed to Annie's procedure nurse. She informed her that the doctor had already spoken to her. "Annie, do you know what happened in there?" Emily asked. "He said it was a bad case," Annie replied. "There's an old woman. She's been in and out of the hospital a few times. Apparently she's gotten worse again. She has a son who keeps asking to be treated at home. And there's no room right now. I think that's why he's coming himself." Exactly 20 minutes later, the doctor came to pick Emily up and they headed to the address. Isaac Alexander was focused and silent. Emily was sometimes even afraid of his presence. He seemed sensual. So they reached the patient without a word. The doctor got out and headed for the entrance. The nurse hurried after him. The woman moaned. Emily's heart clenched. Isaac Alexander examined her and hesitated for a few moments. "Emily, take blood, urine," he said coldly. "I'll take a sample of the vomit myself." Isaac Alexander told the woman's son that he would call him in 2 days, and they would decide what to do. The doctor and the nurse went downstairs and got into his car. Isaac Alexander often drove his vehicle out on work-related errands, and Emily had never heard him ask his superiors for compensation. "I think it's something autoimmune," the doctor whispered. Emily flinched in surprise. "I think it's something masquerading as another disease," he continued. "How is that possible? Don't the tests tell us what the real cause is?" "You can do all the possible tests, ultrasounds and CT scans, and still not see the real cause," Isaac Alexander replied. "You see, we still don't know how the immune system works. We have only a superficial idea, like a small iceberg on the surface of the ocean, and a huge block hidden underwater. Too many factors affect this process. She has no serious diseases, no cancer. But she's falling apart before our eyes. What's happening to her? There's no answer. It's like something triggers and everything goes to hell. Then she goes into remission and everything's more or less fine." "What are you going to do with her?" Emily asked with interest. "Are you going to put her in the hospital?" "First we'll look at the tests," said Isaac Alexander. He stopped talking. They drove the rest of the way in silence, and Emily didn't ask any more questions. The workday continued, and she forgot about her morning commute. The night passed quietly, the May air putting her in a good mood. Emily lay on the couch and thought about her family. Maybe he's right, a thought popped into her head. Having a girl will strengthen our family. Yeah, I'm getting sick of medicine. Emily felt herself tanning. For years she had been responsible in her work, but the fatigue was building up. She and William didn't have the opportunity to go anywhere on vacation. They were making a little more money, but living in the city meant more expenses. Andrew went to sports and a modeling class, which also required money. Will we be able to afford all this if we have a daughter, she wondered. Morning came. Emily cheered up. A couple more hours and she would be going home. She got up and went about her duties. The ward was quiet and she began filling out the many logs. It was almost 8 o'clock when Emily got ready to go home. Another nurse had come to take over her shift, and Emily told her what had happened in the meantime. There were 3 post nurses on the ward who were constantly changing. One of them was a very quiet woman. Lila was in her 50s and she usually didn't get involved in anything. But Amber, who came in now, was noted for her talkativeness and tendency to gossip. Closely, Amber jumped up to her. I have an anniversary in 3 days. You are required to attend. Do you understand me? She burned a glare at her coworker. Yeah, I'll be working anyway, Emily smiled. What's your anniversary? She was confused. Well, of course it is. 40 years, Amber announced proudly. There's even going to be a robot. That's what coworkers called Isaac Alexander among themselves. Can you imagine? When I told him that, say, let's eat cake, drink juice, he nodded to me in agreement. I doubt he'll even eat the cake, Emily laughed. I've never seen him at a meal. Here's coffee. Yeah, he's weird in general, Amber whispered in her ear. I heard he couldn't save his wife, so he takes his anger out on everyone. What happened to her? Curiosity piqued Emily. Didn't know he was married? Yeah, she had something serious going on there. He fought for her life. Took her to New York for a couple years. But nothing helped, Amber quickly echoed. Although I can't imagine who would marry him at all. Do you think he used to be this unsociable? Isaac Alexander is a good doctor, Emily sighed. He's just unlucky. Well, as they say, keep it simple and people will reach out to you. The woman laughed. Okay, until the anniversary. Emily didn't much like her coworker's attitude toward the doctor. He was a genius. They didn't realize that. He may not have been able to save his wife, but he had helped hundreds, or even thousands of people, after all. The woman also thought about the fact that she didn't want to be present at all these meetings at work. It was enough that she had a friend in the children's ward. The rest of the staff didn't really get her attention. Emily walked into the house. Andrew was already at school and her husband William was at work. Despite the sleepless night, she didn't feel like sleeping. She sipped some hot tea and her body relaxed. Emily lay down on the bed and fell asleep. Thus began a new day for her. After lunch, Emily was already doing chores around the house. Dinner was on the stove. She was cutting a salad, went out to get some greens in the vegetable garden, and stopped. The smells of May wafted through the air. Emily had always dreamed of spending a few days watching spring come. But it had never worked out. There were always things to do at home, so she couldn't afford to just sit idle. Emily closed her eyes. It made the smells even more vivid. A bird sang to her left. It felt good. I want a daughter, she said out loud and laughed at her own thoughts. Her soul sang. In the evening, her husband William returned from work. Andrew had returned from modeling. His eyes were burning. He spent almost half an hour telling his mother about his new job. Emily looked at him and realized that her boy had grown up a lot. A couple more years and he would turn into a guy. Mom, we're going to a competition at the sports school. Can you give me some money? He remembered soccer. Sure, she patted him on the head. Son, how much do you need? I'll call your coach. Emily realized that her secret dream of quitting her job was simply unrealistic. She had always wanted her children to have a better life than she or her parents had. Her father and mother had done everything they could for her. But if they'd had the money, Emily would have chosen a different profession. Not to say she liked medicine. She had dreamed of becoming an architect or a designer as a child, but as they say, it didn't work out. Late in the afternoon, William returned. He ate quickly and went straight to bed. Emily marveled again at how their relationship with her son had changed in just over a year. Andrew was no longer as attached to William, perhaps still to his mother. But Emily could see that just a little more and Andrew would begin to live a life of his own already. How strange does it feel, she thought as she went to bed. Somehow I was sure that my son would always be a little boy who would depend on us. How quickly had things changed. The rest of the days flew by quickly. It was getting close to the weekend, which meant Emily had to go to work again. God, she'd completely forgotten about Amber. Emily remembered tonight. She needed to buy a gift. Nothing came to mind, and it was too late. Emily decided to give her coworker the money to buy what she wanted herself. As the morning began, the hustle and bustle began. Amber arrived at 9 with 2 large bags. She started setting the table. Emily was minding her own business. She took the history of the patient they had traveled to with the doctor at the time. The woman quickly ran her eyes over the test results. Yeah, nothing much, she sighed. There was a slight elevation in the proteins in the general analysis, but it wasn't critical, just a fraction of a percent. Isaac Alexander is probably right. What if it all works on the principle of a wave and there was a failure? Then the indicators normalized. But it's already having repercussions. That's several cycles in a row. Emily wasn't a doctor, so she didn't really look into the problem. She didn't have the knowledge or experience. Amber came in. Everyone is already in the nurse's room, she reported. Isaac Alexander looked tired. Everyone congratulated Amber. Emily slipped money into her pocket. The birthday girl glowed. Most importantly, we wish you a speedy marriage. Annie raised her juice glass. We're tired of waiting for you to find one. Did you find him? Amber said cryptically. You won't believe it, just like I wanted. Tall, dark hair, green eyes, dimpled chin, about my age. Wow, murmured the female half. Isaac Alexander was silent, but he looked pleased. He came up to me on the street, Amber cheered. He even wears a watch like I like, with a big face. Emily swallowed. Something niggled in her chest. She chased away the bad feeling. And my favorite name is William, Amber declared. Soon we'll be together, and I'll finally wear my wedding ring. The co-workers sat for half an hour, needing to return to their posts. Emily was pale. She didn't fully realize why she felt so heavy. The nurse walked over to her colleague, pretending to help her clear her desk. Amber, I'm so happy for you, Emily said. I hope your prince isn't married. He's in the process of getting a divorce, she said happily. Billy was unlucky with his wife, so it's her own fault she left him. Does he have children? Emily held her breath. Amber looked at her questioningly. I'm worried about you. I don't know what's going on. Well, yes, daughter, calmed the birthday girl. Why are you being such a baby? I'm not completely stupid. I know what I'm doing. Yes, Emily smiled wryly. Once again, I wish you well. Emily returned home the next day, but she still had her doubts. She could hardly wait until evening. It was about 11 p.m. when her husband returned. Hi, she went up to him. William, we hardly see each other. She lowered her eyes. Emily, what do you want? It's a big city. You can't just live here. You've got to make it work, he smiled. You know, I've been thinking about it, and I think you're right. I want to have a daughter, his wife said suddenly. William was taken aback at first, then put his arms around Emily and kissed her. I'm glad you said yes, he said in a pleased tone. It will be good for both of us. Emily calmed down that evening, falling asleep in her husband's loving arms. She didn't want to think about Amber or her fiancé anymore. Nearly 2 more weeks passed. Emily had already forgotten what had happened at her co-worker's anniversary party. Emily arrived early that day. Amber was dealing with a difficult patient. She had her cell phone on her desk. Suddenly it rang. Emily glanced at the screen. It said, "Beloved," something hot pulsed through her entire body. There was no response, and the phone went silent. Amber walked over. Emily informed her that someone had called her. The woman immediately grabbed the phone, pressing all the same name. Emily somehow miraculously looked at almost every digit of the number, except the last 2. The magazine fell out of her hands, and she hesitated, but Amber had already gone to the window. In a soft voice, she was telling her lover something. Emily sat down at the table. Everything in her head was upside down. For her, it was a matter of life and death and 2 numbers. God, was that really pounding in her temples? Emily quickly grabbed her phone, called her husband. The phone was busy. Her heart nearly jumped out. She kept pressing and pressing William's number. tears streamed from her eyes. Finally, the dial tone went off. Amber came to the table. "Emily, what's wrong?" "I'm at the facility," Billy's husband spoke quickly. "The landlord arrived, giving us a scandal. I called the supervisor." Emily didn't know what to say. "I was just worried," she barely said. "And for good reason." He sighed. "The boss won't pay us, and I'm so sick of it. You work, and then bang. For some reason we did nothing, and the house is shiny and the roof is intact, but somehow the owner doesn't see anything." Emily could barely contain herself, wiped away her tears, and went to the nurse's room. She was in a complicated emotional state. On the one hand, she felt like she was being cheated, and that made her seized with pain. On the other hand, she felt like it was all a coincidence, and she was just screwing with herself. "Emily, come here." The door opened suddenly, and in walked Dr. Isaac Alexander. It was still 30 minutes before the start of her shift. Isaac Alexander's request seemed odd. Emily cleaned herself up so as not to give away her tears and made her way to the doctor. He asked her to sit down. "I'm going on a business trip," he said seriously, "and I need an assistant. I've already made arrangements with the head doctor. Tell me, what about your family? Will it be possible for you to be away for a few days? I know you have a son." "Yes, Andrew is 11 now," the nurse replied, stammering. "He's independent. He mostly gets himself home from his training and club." In all her years at the hospital, this was the first time she'd ever been sent on a business trip. "All right then, Lily will be out tomorrow," Isaac informed Alexander. "And I'll pick you up at 8. Be ready." Emily sat back in her chair, but the doctor was already immersed in his work. The nurse had left. "Why me?" she whispered. "Wouldn't Amber be more suitable? She didn't have a family." It wasn't that Emily didn't want to go, but the whole thing seemed odd. Isaac Alexander never complimented her, and he never spoke to her except on business. Lily arrived in the evening, replacing Emily at the doctor's request. Now the nurses had to work together for a few days in 3 houses. Emily's husband couldn't believe his eyes. "What happened?" he asked. "I'm going on a business trip tomorrow," she said. "For 3 days. Billy, please take Andrew. He gets off much earlier than I do. It gets dark outside at 8, and he's home by half." "Mom, don't worry about me." Her son came up to her. "I'm not a little kid anymore." Yeah, she patted him on the head. "Andrew, you can already say that you are a man?" "Have you sorted things out at work?" Billy asked. "Did you get paid?" "Yeah, our foreman came by with some guys. Anyway, they worked it out," he said. "Do you know what a drag this is? Last month we didn't get paid for the repairs, which is almost $25,000 each." Emily hadn't thought much about it, but now she saw that almost every month someone would underpay or deliberately lower the price. All in all, William's job was precarious. Emily sighed. In the morning, a car pulled up at 8 sharp. She grabbed her bag, headed to the doctor's office. He greeted her coldly. "Where are we going?" She couldn't help herself. "It's the first time I'm going on a business trip to a village," he replied calmly. "We will spend the night at my relative's house. The residents have recently had serious kidney problems, and the region has asked me to take a look. Will you help me take tests, give injections?" What could it be, Emily wondered. Some kind of waste being dumped. "That's the thing, there aren't any businesses there," Isaac Alexander replied. "They sent me an ultrasound. His kidneys are in a deplorable state, even to the point of kidney failure. The hospital in the municipal center is already overcrowded. I'm looking at those who are at home now. The local paramedic can't cope. We'll take the blood and urine to the lab this afternoon." Emily realized they had a tough job ahead of them. It was about the critically ill. At almost 11 o'clock, they pulled into the village. It was like a ghost. The streets were empty. Isaac Alexander stopped near one house and entered himself. After a while, he called out to Emily as well. "The master is in the hospital now," he said. "He knows I'll be with you for a few days at his place. Don't be afraid." The medical staff quickly dropped their belongings and began to go door to door. The pain and suffering made Emily's blood boil in her veins. Many lay half asleep. The paramedic was giving them painkillers, as there was nothing else he could do. Emily saw Isaac Alexander coldly examining one patient after another. She took blood and urine for analysis and placed them in special containers. "Now into town," the doctor commanded. "We were promised emergency tests. We don't have much time." "What do you think? Did you find something?" Emily looked at him with interest. "Isaac Alexander, is this some kind of epidemic?" "No, I think it's something in the water," he replied. "I've already collected 5 samples from the wells. We'll stop at the river and the lake on the way now. We'll have to take a look." They quickly took all the necessary things and drove into town. The doctor was silent. He was thinking hard about something. "It looks like oil," the doctor's voice finally broke the silence. "The toxic effect of heavy metals." "If there aren't any factories around here, then what is it?" Emily hesitated. "You know, the best way is to walk around the village with a metal detector. And everything will fall into place at once," the doctor sighed. "Some idiot buried some heavy metal residue somewhere. God knows what he did with them. But if we're talking about some kind of manufacturing, it's very possible." "But how? I mean, they check cars at checkpoints. How could they smuggle this stuff in?" "Well, lead, cadmium, arsenic, for example. I'm not sure about mercury. Aluminum doesn't have such an effect on humans. They're more afraid of it. But the others, it's enough to lose 5 or 10 pounds somewhere near the source. And they didn't do it now. Maybe 6 months ago. It's just that now it's all gone into the groundwater and it's coming out of the wells." The car stopped outside the local hospital. Emily realized they'd come to the next town over. This whole situation was freaking her out. Isaac Alexander took all the biological material to the laboratory and started talking to the head doctor. And Emily stood aside and thought about her own. Until almost 3 o'clock, the doctor was busy examining the injured patients. Unfortunately, 3 had already died. The kidneys were too seriously damaged. In addition, the small town hospital did not have expensive medicines. It was almost 8 when Isaac Alexander approached Emily again. She, too, helped him from time to time. "We're going home," he said. "We'll stop at some store on the way. Get something for dinner," the doctor offered tiredly. "Unfortunately, my relative hasn't gotten any better. All we can do is wait." "Emily, did you have to travel so much during the day that you couldn't even talk?" Isaac Alexander himself went to the store, bought food and water. Back in his college days, he made scrambled eggs in the kitchen. "Although you could say, nothing has changed in my life since those times. I'm not a foodie at all. I don't have enough time for that." "I'm not much of a cook either," Emily smiled, "although my family status obliges me to. But family is always a support," replied Isaac Alexander. "I can't say that I don't like loneliness," but sometimes he fell silent. "I heard that your wife died," Emily ventured. "I'm sorry." "Well, that was a long time ago," he sighed. "Besides, I'm so caught up in my work that I try not to think about it. Well, let's drink tea and go to bed. Tomorrow is not going to be an easy day. Perhaps we'll be able to get some results." Emily cleared the table. Isaac Alexander showed her the room to make her own bed in the next room. The woman had already called her husband. He was home. Andrew was already asleep. The busy day kept Emily from returning to her thoughts. She closed her eyes. A green meadow appeared in front of her, and Emily heard some voices. The vision turned into a dream, and the woman fell deeply into it. She awoke abruptly. Though still light at heart, the dream did not bode well for her. She was marrying William, saw her beautiful dress, her veil. "Something will happen," she muttered, and she heard the door creak open. But something was catching. The doctor was already up, putting the kettle on in the kitchen. Emily came to her senses, and having changed her clothes, left the room. "Good morning," he said as dryly as before. "Let's have breakfast. We need to see the patients, and then we'll go back to the city." Both were silent, drinking coffee. Emily even liked Isaac Alexander's company. He didn't ask questions, didn't pry. Toward the end, she couldn't take it anymore. "Why did you take me? After all, I have not worked with you for so long," she asked. "That's exactly the reason. I know the others very well, he said seriously. Emily was silent. She didn't quite understand what the doctor meant, but she didn't ask. 2 of the patients got worse. They had to be sent to the hospital. Isaac Alexander didn't seem nervous, but Emily could tell by the way his cheekbones moved. The city had gotten the first results. The prognosis was unfavorable, but just as I thought, lead and arsenic, he sighed. They dumped something right where the artesian pools were, brought the waste in and just poured it out of the barrels. Emily was shocked, but from the results, the water was the problem. The heavy metal levels were more than 20 times higher. The administration had already banned the use of the spring water for any purpose. Since few people kept livestock in the village, the deaths were not so widespread. The goats suffered the most. Isaac Alexander called the region time and time again, beating out the necessary drugs. The case reached New York. It was impossible to delay it, threatened the death of people. More doctors came to the village from other districts. The seriously ill began to be sent to places where there were opportunities for treatment and could be connected to the machines. The 3rd day was over. Emily and the doctor were going home. The relative they were staying with was feeling better, so there was hope for Isaac Alexander. "Is that your brother?" Emily asked him on the way home. "I'm very happy for him and for you." "No, he is my wife's brother," Isaac Alexander answered. "After her death, we sometimes communicate." Emily sank back into herself, remembering last night's dream. Her whole body was covered with goosebumps. Actually, they were supposed to arrive tomorrow morning, but Isaac Alexander decided to return at night. Emily didn't bother calling the household, carefully opened the wicket gate, then inserted the key as well, and the front door opened. The house was dark. Emily went in to see her son. He was asleep. She headed to her room and William was gone. Her wife walked to the hall, but he was absent there as well. She walked toward the garage. William always drove the car in for the night, and to her amazement, the car wasn't there either. Emily felt dizzy and dialed William. He didn't answer. It was 2 on the clock. "God, where is he?" She sobbed. Her nerves had frayed over the last few days, and Emily couldn't keep her cool. She could barely sleep. She had to stay home tomorrow, and her shift started the day after. "Mom, hi." Andrew was surprised to see her early in the morning. "I thought I would see you only in the evening." "Son, where is father?" she asked in a trembling voice. "Did you see him last night?" "Yes. When I went to bed, he was at home," Andrew answered at once. "Yeah, he'd already left for work. Look at the time. Dad's got a big order now, so he's leaving early these days." "So you haven't seen him in the mornings?" Emily asked. "Andrew, answer me." "No," shrugged his son. "Mom, what's going on? We weren't even expecting you until tonight. Dad said you'd go straight to work from your business trip." That was right. That was Emily's plan at first, but the other post nurse gave her until tomorrow morning to rest. Emily had forgotten to warn William about that. Something's not right here, she thought. When Andrew left for school, she wondered, where has he been sleeping all this time? It's no use asking him. I must find out for myself. William opened his eyes and stretched sweetly. Amber lay next to him. She was still asleep. The man got up and began to dress. "This has to end," he muttered to himself. Our affair had gone on too long. Still, William couldn't help himself. He didn't know what he wanted. He didn't want to lose Emily, because she was a reliable person. With her, he could spend a peaceful old age, and if anything, she would look after him. On the other hand, he was bored. He stood and looked at himself in the mirror and saw great potential. Except with Emily, it wasn't being realized. He wanted passion, crazy emotions, in general, everything that usually happens with mistresses. William forgot about Tammy all too quickly. He no longer felt bad about it, and Emily wouldn't know about it. Well, he'd go out for a couple months. It's nothing. He'd still be with his wife, he thought. The most interesting thing was that only in the middle of the novel William learned that Amber works in the same hospital where his wife works. Moreover, they were, you could say, co-workers. This confused William at first. He immediately wanted to break up with Amber, but she was so into him that he realized not yet ready to leave her. That's how they met. According to the man, he was in the process of divorce because of a worthless wife. Naturally, he was unhappy. And since he was earning well and gave Amber good gifts, she had already made plans for him. She had to marry William, and at any cost. For a very conflicted Amber, who could not get along with anyone until 40 years old, it was the last chance. So the woman wasn't backing down. "Good morning, Kitty," heard the man behind him. "Are you awake already? Come here." She held out her arms to him. "Amber, I'll finish one thing and we'll have a serious talk," William smiled. "Yes, I hope it's about our future," her eyes lit up. "Billy, when are we going to be together?" "About our future," he answered. Except William was going to talk about ending the relationship, not continuing it. Amber pulled her lover toward her. She was happy. She had no doubt that everything would be her way now. Amber had wanted to quit her job for a long time. She was fed up with it already. William looked so much like the kind of man who could provide for Amber. She had been living the dream of him for the last few weeks. Amber was ready to write her resignation letter tomorrow, but she needed assurances. Until William put an engagement ring on her finger, there was a chance he'd run away from her. Amber's sharp tongue scared off even the most patient men who seemed to love her. All in all, the lovers made different plans for each other. William had cooled his passion, and Amber no longer stirred a storm of emotion in him. He quickly turned on his phone and turned pale. Emily had called him many times, and at night. "Okay, I need to get to work. The chief has already called several times." He quickly rushed out of the house. What's her problem? He thought as he got in his car and drove away from Amber's house. Around the corner, he stopped. "Emily, hi," he heard his wife's voice. "I'm sorry, I slept at the site. Didn't hear you call?" "Billy will talk to you later," she sounded angry. "I'm busy right now." William flinched. Something told him that Emily didn't believe his fables. Okay, later means later. He threw the phone down angrily and drove to work. Basically, they had already finished the renovations. They'd had a few days of downtime, and he'd spent all that time at Amber's place, coming over only in the evening so his son wouldn't suspect anything. "I should have broken up with her when she told him she was working at the hospital," the man said angrily to himself. "God forbid Emily finds out. She wouldn't forgive me this time. I don't need Amber for nothing, but I'm not leaving Emily." The man didn't even see himself contradicting himself. In his mind, it was normal to have an affair on the side and then kiss his wife as if nothing had happened. William thought that if he was living with Emily, it meant he loved her. There are no other options. He drove up to a friend's house with whom they worked together. There was nothing to do, and he didn't want to stay at Amber's place either. She'd already gotten everything she wanted the night before, and William was tired of her. But the mistress herself didn't think so. "Billy, can you get out for half an hour? I really need your help," she called to him. He went outside so his friend wouldn't hear him. "Yeah, I bought something here, something heavy. I need you to come over. The cab didn't want to take me." "All right. Where are you?" "I got it. I'll be there in 15 minutes, he promised. Emily was very angry with her husband. She felt like this was all some kind of game. The evidence that William was hiding something was too obvious. His excuses didn't convince her. Emily couldn't find a place to be. She was very tired, but she couldn't sleep. She decided to go downtown to get some distraction, to go shopping. Emily got off the bus with no mood and headed towards the mall. She sat down on a bench. It was nice out, she sighed and looked around, and her gaze fell on the cars standing near the building. In the far corner, she saw some woman kissing her beau. Emily looked closely, but didn't see anything unusual. The lovers were too far away to see them in detail. But a car pulled away, and suddenly Emily saw that it was their passenger car. She had no doubt about it. Cab. She ran up to the car with the checkered license plate. "Please follow that blue Lada, just so they don't see us." "We're in pursuit," laughed the cabbie. "I hope there won't be a shootout." "No," Emily said angrily. "I don't have a gun. I don't carry them in public." The man froze in his seat. He didn't really like the passenger's joke. and they drove for about 20 minutes. William turned down a street. The cabbie followed him. The car stopped and Amber got out. The cab drove past. Emily tried to hide so she wouldn't be seen and saw her husband pulling something heavy out. It was a struggle for the woman to get home. She was torn by unbearable pain. She was alone, screaming for relief. At first she wanted to call her husband and tell him everything, but then she pulled herself together and wrote a message to her son that she would go to work today. She arrived at the hospital that night, asked her shift worker to go home. "Emily, what are you doing here?" Her lips quivered. "I'm fine. I thought I'd let Lily rest. I'll be on duty tonight. Can't you, Alexander?" Looked at her pale face, answered nothing, went to his room. Emily didn't know he was sleeping at the hospital tonight, too. He'd gotten a good night's sleep during the day. While they were gone, a patient had been brought in who urgently needed help. He had to be under constant observation for at least a couple days. It was almost 1 o'clock in the morning. Emily sat in the nurse's room, crying. She didn't want to live, even though all of this was obvious. Emily didn't think she couldn't live through it this time. "I'm sorry, Andrew," she whispered. "Son, but I can't go on like this." She moved the jar of medication toward her. She didn't have the strength to fight anymore. She gave up, brought a mug of water to her lips, trembling, poured the pills on the table. Everyone slept so she would be found dead in the morning. Emily was so absorbed in her pain that she didn't even hear the footsteps. She put the palm of her hand to her mouth with the pills. "What are you doing?" Isaac Alexander rushed to her, grabbed the nurse's hand, and all the pills flew to the floor. "Emily, what's going on?" He squeezed her palm so tightly that she even shrieked. The woman stared at him blankly. The doctor opened the faucet, drew water, poured it over her head with lightning speed. "What are you doing?" "I'm wet." She came to her senses. She waved her hands away from the doctor. Isaac Alexander still managed to wipe her hair with a towel. He pulled the woman against him. Emily hugged him and sobbed loudly. "It's all right," he said in a gentle voice. "Emily, you're going to feel better now." He grabbed the nurse and dragged her into his office. He quickly took out some pills and threw them into a glass of water. Emily managed to drink them down. She was trembling. Isaac Alexander kept stroking her head. She began to calm down. "Thank you," she whispered. "Oh my God, I almost poisoned myself." She didn't even have the strength to cry. Isaac Alexander put her on the couch and stayed with her until she fell asleep. "Stupid girl," he scolded as he returned to his office. "No problem is worth taking your own life." Around 6, Emily opened her eyes and immediately remembered what had happened. She felt both ashamed and hurt that she could have died. She opened the door. Isaac Alexander was asleep. She gazed into his face. It was filled with light. I guess there are angels on earth, after all, she thought. That's how kindness and a desire to help people hide behind coldness and calculating. Isaac Alexander seemed so dear to her. Emily sat quietly in her chair and watched him. She didn't know how much time had passed, but at one point the doctor opened his eyes. "How long?" he asked immediately. "Emily, are you okay?" "Yes, thanks to you, I didn't make a fatal mistake. Otherwise I wouldn't be here," she lowered her eyes. "Can you tell me what happened?" The doctor sat down on the couch. "Judging by what you wanted to do, something serious." "My husband cheated on me." And not for the first time, tears flowed down her cheeks. "When we were still living at home, he had an affair with our neighbor." And now Emily was silent. "And now my husband is having an affair with Amber, remember? She told me at her birthday party that she'd met a prince. Well, it was him. I saw them together. Yeah, it's Santa Barbara." Isaac Alexander scratched his head. "But if he's such an unreliable man, then he's hardly worth you taking your life because of him." "I certainly won't now. It was some kind of obsession. I don't know how to explain it to you. I was in so much pain," she whispered. "I understand. I was in the same situation myself once. After my wife died, I didn't want to live either. I tried slitting my wrists once, but I couldn't. And the second time I wanted to hang myself. But all the time someone held me back. I trusted this force, and now I am grateful to God that He did not allow my death. You have to live, no matter how difficult it is. It's the only way to understand why we've been given all this. Emily calmed down. She realized clearly that she would not stay with William, no matter how much their son suffered. She could never forgive her husband again. By 8, Amber came in, radiant. Emily was as cold to her as ever. "Were you tortured last night?" She was outraged. "Why are you looking at me like I'm the enemy?" Emily went to change. A doctor approached the post nurse. Isaac Alexander asked her to come in to see him. "You wanted to see me?" Amber tossed the doctor nonchalantly. "I see Semyonov hasn't gotten any better." "Yes, but this isn't about him," the doctor replied calmly. "Amber, I'd like us to have a private conversation." The nurse jumped. The first thing that came to her mind was that Isaac Alexander would be imposing on her as a fiancé. "Amber, a bad situation has come up," he began, "and I don't even know how to tell you about it." "What is it?" The woman exclaimed impatiently. "If you want to ask me out, I'm sorry, I'm busy." That's exactly what this is about. "Amber, are you going to marry someone else's husband?" Isaac Alexander's cheekbones flared. "I don't know how this mistake happened, but your fiancé is Emily's husband. She saw you outside the mall yesterday. She followed you in a cab to your house. Her husband gave you a ride," Isaac Alexander pointed out. What a load of crap. Amber jumped out of his office and started calling her lover. "Billy, answer quickly." "Your wife, Emily." William disconnected immediately. Amber tried calling him many more times, but he blocked her number. Emily had already gone home, so she couldn't talk to her in person. William realized he was busted, angry at himself, but he had to get out of it somehow. The best option was to disappear out of sight for a few days for now to figure something out. Amber dialed up her rival. She was insanely angry, except the woman didn't realize that Emily had nothing to do with it at all. "You stupid fool." She yelled into the phone. "Why are you slandering me? Are you trying to make me look bad? You're having an affair with Billy and you want to get rid of witnesses." "Amber, what are you talking about?" Emily tried to talk to her calmly. "Are you the one going out with my husband? I didn't interfere with your family." "You're lying," Amber screamed. "Are you sleeping with that asshole? I saw you. So you're cheating on your husband? The bitch loves my Billy." The woman didn't want to admit she'd been caught. It wasn't even that William had inherently lied to her. Amber didn't want to admit she'd gotten herself into such a messy mess. She just couldn't. Her reputation wouldn't let her. Amber was ready to tear everyone apart. William still hadn't returned her calls. The woman had worked her shift, but she wasn't going to let it go. "Well, I'll show you," she threatened Emily. "The bitch couldn't hold on to a man, and now she's blaming me." Amber had already realized that William was really her husband. But instead of being angry at him, she focused all her hatred on Emily. "I'll show you. You'll be kicked out of the hospital," she threatened. "You idiot. She got a man like that." Emily couldn't reach William either. Her son came home that evening, so she decided to talk to Andrew. "Son," she sighed, "you're a big boy and you understand something about life." Looked at him, mother. "It happens that adults can go their separate ways." "Did you and your father have a fight?" The boy guessed. "I won't get involved. If Dad leaves us, I won't feel guilty anymore," he reassured her. "Thank you," Emily hugged him. "Andrew, I love you so much." She already wanted to fly out of this cage to freedom, and she finally calmed down. She no longer saw any obstacle to staying with her husband. She had endured almost a year for her son's sake, but William had not changed. And Emily had no idea what problems lay ahead. Emily entered the hospital. She hated to cross paths with Amber, but Amber was waiting for her. Remember, she whirled her hands in front of her face. "I'm not to be trifled with. Is it your fault that Billy cheated on you?" I know what was really going on between you two. He told me everything. The other guy would have kicked you out of the house a long time ago." She was yelling really loud on purpose. "What did he tell you?" Emily asked with her arms crossed over her chest. "Did he catch me with a man?" "That," too, Amber said angrily. "I can see why you got your hands on that robot. Billy told me how you were having an affair with the guy in charge at your house. He wouldn't leave you for your son." The whole hospital was buzzing about Emily sleeping with Isaac Alexander. Naturally, Amber did it deliberately to cover her dirty deeds. Now, there were few people who believed Emily's words, even if she did say that Amber had been out with William. Emily knocked on the door to the doctor's office, walked in and couldn't stand it, covered her face with her hand and sobbed. "Emily, what happened?" He came up to her. "Did your husband hurt you?" "No. Amber told everyone that you and I were lovers. Can you believe it?" She sobbed. "What the hell is that?" He swore. "She's confused about her connections. She can't see what's true and what isn't. And the worst thing is that everyone believes her." Emily looked at him with eyes full of tears. "Idiot." She asked for it. He left the office abruptly. "I'll cut her down." After lunch, the head doctor summoned Amber to his office. Isaac Alexander and Emily were already in the office. "Amber Stevens," the chief addressed her, "on what grounds did you decide that your co-workers were engaging in lewd behavior at work? Did you see it with your own eyes?" Amber really wanted to lie, but she felt the consequences would not be pleasant. "No," she said quietly, her eyes downcast and silent. The head doctor gave her a hard look. Unfortunately, he did something she had not expected. He paused. "You are fired," he said loudly. "Bring a statement, and I'll sign it." "Take it easy," the head doctor said. "Amber, like you are a pond, and real specialists like Isaac Alexander can be counted on the fingers. If you had a brain, you wouldn't be making all this up." Amber walked out of the head doctor's office in crocodile tears, and her career was over. Her job didn't seem so bad now. Amber had gotten a small house from her first husband, so basically she'd settled into life pretty well. Now she had no money and no job. Emily thanked the doctor for his support and got to work. She decided not to wait any longer. Tomorrow morning she would try to find her husband. "Isaac Alexander, let me use your phone to make a call," Emily asked the doctor before leaving. "My husband doesn't take my calls." The doctor handed her the phone and left the office. Emily had a feeling William would answer it for her, since the call could have been from a potential client. "Hello," the wife spoke quickly. "I'm filing for divorce. There can be no talking. Your half of the house I'll buy out." "Okay, I'll be there," William angrily replied and disconnected the phone. Emily drove home with only one question: where would she get the money for the house? Perhaps there was something her parents could do to help her. Maybe he would agree to match the alimony? The thought crossed her mind, though I'd even agree without them, just so he'd be out of my life. Before Emily could enter the house, William appeared on the doorstep. Andrew was already at school. "Please don't be silly," Emily said immediately. "Billy, we're adults. Everything has to be paid for. If you didn't understand anything after the first time, you'll never understand again." William didn't really engage in dialogue. He agreed to give up his share of the alimony. Basically, he was making good money. He packed some things and left. Emily was overjoyed. As she found out later, he'd moved in with Amber. The latter walked around with her head held high and said that she was right all along, but as soon as she got what she wanted, she started acting like she always had. That's why William never even got married. 6 months later, he packed up his things and left in an unknown direction. Amber had no choice but to badmouth him now. It wasn't like she could make a fool of herself. It was always someone else's fault in Amber's life. The relationship between Emily and Isaac Alexander, on the other hand, had become friendlier and warmer. "Emily, come see me," the doctor called her one day. "It's an emergency," he asked. Emily rushed over. The doctor was standing by the window, as he always did. He had a cup of coffee in his hands. "It's my birthday today," he smiled. "Would you like to keep me company? It's been so long since I've celebrated it. Do you want to take Andrew with you?" And go where her eyes lit up. "Isaac Alexander, I suggest someplace quiet." Andrew chatted with his father. To his mother's surprise, he'd gotten through the divorce easily. He was already going on 13. Young one, sit by yourself, the son replied to her invitation. You, on the other hand, Isaac Alexander will bring you. You won't be bored alone at home. She hugged him. Andrew, you're all grown up now, so I understand you two needing to babysit, he laughed. Ma, I like him. Nice uncle, nobody called him uncle for sure, laughed his mother. Okay, rest up. She ruffled her son's hair. That night was a new phase in the lives of both Emily and Isaac Alexander. 3 months later, they were married. And now Emily was taking care of him, keeping him from working so much. Of course, it was hard for Isaac Alexander to relax after so many years of hard work. But in their lives, there was another circumstance. Emily, almost 40, gave birth to his daughter. Isaac Alexander reduced the load at work to spend more time with his wife and children. They sold Emily's house and the doctor's parents' house, which was empty for many years. So they were able to travel a little and pamper the children. And they tried not to hurt themselves. Isaac Alexander was well paid for consultations in fee-based clinics. And Emily, as soon as her daughter grew up, returned to her home hospital.